She couldn't see the guns pointed at her head. She couldn't see the 47 men in that lobby reaching for their weapons. She couldn't see the blood-red fury in the eyes of the most feared criminal on the East Coast. All Serena Vale could do was stand there in the freezing rain still dripping from her coat, white cane trembling in her grip, and feel the sudden terrible silence of a room that had stopped breathing. Then one man spoke. One word, soft as a knife pressed flat against the throat. Mine. And every gun in that room went still. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when a blind woman accidentally walks into the center of a war she was born inside, keep watching. Like this video, drop your city in the comments below and let me see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. The rain hit Manhattan like a punishment. It came sideways off the Hudson around 7 in the evening, mean and cold and carrying that particular smell of August turning rotten. Exhaust fumes and standing water and something electric burning somewhere deep inside the city's chest. The kind of storm that didn't announce itself. It just arrived, and suddenly every umbrella on Fifth Avenue was useless, and the gutters were rivers and taxicabs stopped for no one. Serena Vale had been walking for 11 blocks. She knew it was 11 because she counted. She always counted. Footsteps, corners, the specific vibration of different manhole covers beneath the rubber tip of her white cane. Counting was how she navigated a world that had stopped showing her its face 10 years ago, and she was good at it the way surgeons are good at things. Through repetition until the skill became reflex, until the skill became survival. 11 blocks from the 72nd Street subway exit, where the A train had stopped running due to a flooded track, and the conductor had announced it over the intercom with the kind of cheerful helplessness that people use when the problem isn't theirs. She had her cello case strapped across her back. 42 pounds of instrument and carbon fiber shell pressing between her shoulder blades, throwing off her balance in the wind. The strap had been cutting into her left collarbone for 6 blocks, and she kept adjusting it with her free hand, cane sweeping the sidewalk ahead of her in short, practiced arcs, while the rain plastered her dark hair flat against her neck. A cab splashed a wave across her ankles. She said nothing. Kept moving. The city sounded different in heavy rain. The white noise of water falling across everything, compressing the audio landscape, swallowing the distant sounds she normally used to triangulate. The gap between buildings, the Doppler shift of traffic, the way sound bounced differently off glass storefronts versus brick versus scaffolding. In heavy rain, all of that degraded, became unreliable, and she had to navigate more carefully and with more deliberate attention, which made her slower, which she hated. She had a performance at 9. The Whitmore Chamber Orchestra played the second of its August residency concerts tonight at Carnegie Hall, and Serena was their principal cellist, and the program included Dvořák's cello concerto in B minor, which she had performed 41 times since she was 19 years old. And she was 26 now, and she still felt physically sick every time she waited in the wings before the downbeat. Not from fear of forgetting the notes. She would never forget the notes. She had built the music into her nervous system the way other people built habits, but from the particular electric terror of exposure, of being seen while being unable to see in return, of standing in the full force of 2,300 pairs of eyes with only sound to orient herself. The sick feeling was the price of the music. She had decided long ago to pay it without complaint, but right now the music felt very far away because the rain was getting worse and she was soaked through, and her cane tip had just found the edge of a broken sidewalk panel, and she nearly went down hard, saving herself with a fast sideways step that sent a bolt of pain up her left ankle. She stood still for a moment, breathing, orienting. To her left, the low rumble of a hotel generator, which meant a large building, which meant an overhang or a lobby. She had walked this stretch of Park Avenue maybe 60 times in the last 3 years. Just south of 54th Street, on the east side, there was a hotel here, the Hawthorne Regency. She remembered it because the doorman always called out to her when she passed, the same 2 men working the evening rotation for what seemed like years, one of them with a thick Staten Island accent who always said nice night for it regardless of the actual weather as a kind of private joke between them. Good men. The kind of good that was really just harmless, which wasn't the same thing but was something. She turned left, found the overhang, Found the edge of the porte cochere where the valets usually stood, but they were gone, driven inside by the storm. Found the revolving door through the vibration of its motor and the smell of heated air pushing outward through the gap, warm and faintly perfumed with the particular expensive lobby scent of fresh flowers and something woodsy and controlled. She pushed through. The revolving door was heavy and slightly faster than she expected, and the cello case caught the curved glass panel on her right side, twisting her clockwise, throwing her off balance mid-rotation, and she came through the other side of the door already stumbling with her cane sweeping wide in front of her as she tried to arrest her momentum. She hit something solid, not a wall, not a pillar, a person. Her cane clattered sideways. Her free hand caught the lapel of a jacket, fine wool, heavy, well cut. Before she could stop it, fingers closing involuntarily around the fabric as her body tilted forward and her shoulder impacted against a chest that did not move, did not give, that absorbed the collision the way concrete absorbs rain. She was close enough to feel breath. She straightened immediately, stepped back, let go of the jacket. "I'm sorry," she said, voice flat and professional from 10 years of apologizing for her existence in spaces designed for sighted people. "I lost my balance coming through the door. I apologize." The lobby had gone quiet. Not gradually. Not the natural fade of conversation between strangers. It had gone quiet the way a room goes quiet when something has changed in the air. Sudden and total, like a switch thrown. She could feel it in the quality of the silence, in the way ambient sound seemed to compress and retreat. The distant piano music from somewhere deeper in the hotel still playing, but everything else in the immediate vicinity simply stopping. Too many people in this lobby, she registered, and they had all gone still at once. The man she'd run into hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. She could feel the heat radiating off him. He was close, still within arm's reach, and he was big, and he was absolutely motionless in the way that only certain kinds of men are motionless. Not frozen, not startled, but deliberately contained, the way pressure is contained. She heard the sound she didn't understand at first, a dry metallic double click that her brain processed a half-second later and identified for what it was. A gun being taken off safety. Then another, somewhere to her right. Then her chest went cold. At least two more, different positions. A loose perimeter forming around her in the sound space of the lobby, like something she could feel even without seeing it. The focused attention of armed men doing what armed men do when a threat appears near someone they are paid to protect. Her fingers tightened on nothing. Her cane was on the floor somewhere to her left. She stopped, started again, kept her voice level, which cost her something. "I'm blind. I lost my balance. I didn't mean to. I know you're blind." The voice came from directly in front of her, low, not loud. No volume was needed in a room this quiet. An accent slightly smoothed out by money and education, but with something underneath it, something Mediterranean, something that had spent time in rooms where other men did not speak unless invited to. "Don't move." Not a request. She didn't move. Seconds passed. She counted them the way she counted everything. 4, 5, 6. The man stepped closer. She could feel the displacement of air. He was looking at her. She knew the sensation even without seeing it, had learned long ago how attention had a physical weight. But he wasn't looking at her the way people usually looked at a blind woman who had just stumbled into them. He was looking at her the way people look at something they recognize, something that interrupts a thought they'd been carrying for a long time. She felt a hand, careful, 2 fingers only, touch the underside of her jaw, tipping her chin slightly upward and to the right. She went rigid. "Don't!" "The scar," the man said, very quietly, more to himself than to her. The crescent scar. Her breath stopped. The scar beneath her jaw was shaped like a crescent moon, a little less than 2 inches long, tucked into the soft tissue where the jaw met the throat on the right side. She had had it for 10 years. She had never, in 10 years, had a stranger touch her face and name it. "Who are you?" she said. It came out flat. Not a question exactly. An accusation. "Dorian Vescari," he said, and said it the way a man says his own name in a room where it doesn't need explaining, like he expected the name itself to be enough of an answer. She didn't know the name. She said so. "That means nothing to me." A pause. Then, very faintly, something that might have been a sound of amusement that never quite became one. No, I don't suppose it would. The guns were still out. She could tell from the positioning of the men around her by the weight of their attention, the particular quality of stillness that armed men hold when they haven't yet been told to stand down. Her heart was hitting the inside of her ribs with a regularity that felt obscene to her, too loud, too obvious. The body broadcasting what the face was trying to conceal. "Tell your people to put their weapons away," she said. "I'm a musician. I have a performance in 2 hours. I came in out of the rain." "I know why you came in." He said it slowly, like he was choosing each word. "And I'll tell them to stand down when I'm ready. Then be ready now." Another pause. Longer this time. "Mercer?" A single word directed sideways. And she heard the sounds she'd been waiting for. The soft reholstering of weapons, a few quiet footsteps adjusting position, the slight collective exhale of a room resuming something close to normal breathing. Not entirely normal, but better. Someone retrieved her cane from the floor. A hand offered it to her. She felt the tap against her wrist, the way people do when they're guiding her to an object. And she took it and gripped it and felt slightly more herself. The man, Dorian Vescari, the name still meaning nothing, had not moved back. He was still within 2 feet of her. "You need to come with me," he said. "I absolutely do not." "There are men in your apartment right now." The words came out evenly. No drama, no inflation. The way a weather report comes out. "They were there when you left this morning. They're still there. If you go back tonight, you'll be dead before midnight." The lobby was very, very quiet. Serena stood in the middle of it and listened to the rain hitting the windows and tried to locate a lie in his voice and found nothing she could name with certainty, which was the most frightening thing he had said so far. "How would you know that?" she said. "Because I'm the reason they're looking for you," Dorian said, "and I've been trying to get ahead of them for 3 days." She said nothing for several seconds. "You have exactly 30 seconds, she said finally, "to give me a reason not to scream this building down." "Your father's name," he said, "was Marcus Vale. He was not an accountant, and the accident that killed him was not an accident." The cane nearly slipped from her fingers. Her father, Marcus Vale, died 8 years ago in what the police report called a single-vehicle accident on the Palisades Interstate Parkway, 11:47 p.m., October 14th. No other vehicles involved. A hairpin turn, a wet road, a guardrail that didn't hold. The same night, the same crash, that sent Serena to the hospital with a traumatic optic nerve injury that the surgeons had described to her mother in very precise language as permanent and complete. She had not spoken her father's name in 4 years, not because she didn't think about him, because the grief was still sharp enough that speaking his name out loud felt like putting weight on a break that hadn't healed. "Don't," she said. Her voice came out wrong, thin. "I'm not doing this to hurt you." He said it straight. "I need you to understand the situation, quickly. There's a car outside." "I'm not getting in your car." "Serena." The name in his mouth stopped her. He said it like he'd said it before, privately, in rooms where she wasn't present, like he knew what shape it made. "The men in your apartment aren't from my organization. They're from Raphael Corsetti's. Do you know that name?" She didn't. "Then you need to, because they're not there for money. They're not there to scare you. They're there because Corsetti believes you have something that belonged to your father, and Corsetti does not send men to apartments to have conversations." "I don't have anything that belonged to my father. He's been dead for 8 years. He left you more than you know." She was quiet. Her hand on the cane was white-knuckled, and she could feel her pulse in her fingertips, and the wet of her hair was cold against her neck, and the cello case was still heavy on her back, and somehow all of those physical facts seemed very important right now. Seemed like evidence that she was a real person standing in a real place, that this conversation was actually happening. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "Show me something that proves what you're saying, something I can verify, something only someone who knew my father would know." A pause. "The scar," he said. "I have a scar. Anyone who's gotten close enough to me can see it. The scar is in the shape of a crescent moon," he said. "Your father used to call you Luna. He gave you that nickname the first time he held you as an infant because you were born at 2 in the morning and he said the moonlight was coming through the hospital window and it found you. He called you Luna until you were 4 years old and you told him it was embarrassing and made him stop. He switched to calling you Ren. But the scar, when the EMTs found you after the accident, your father was already gone and you were unconscious. And there was a first responder named Danny Cahill who is now retired and living in Sarasota. And Cahill told the officers at the scene that he couldn't find a pulse for 11 seconds before he found it. And in those 11 seconds, he held your face in his hands, and he noticed the scar, and he thought it looked like a crescent moon. And he told that to a colleague of mine 9 years ago. Serena's throat was closed. Your father told me about the nickname the night I met him, Dorian said. March of the year he died. He said he was worried about you. He said he had done things that made him worried about you. She swallowed, hard. What things? That's a longer conversation, the kind that requires you to be somewhere safe. I was safe until you started talking. No, he said, with a patience that had something weathered inside it, something old and tired and not unkind. You were hidden. Those are not the same thing. She stood very still for another moment, counted. Not footsteps this time, just the seconds. Just her own breathing. I have a performance, she said. I'll call the orchestra. She stopped. You don't call the Whitmore Chamber Orchestra. You can't just, I'll handle it. Who are you? He didn't answer that directly. The car is armored. The penthouse has redundant security systems. You'll have a room, your own bathroom, whatever you need. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to not die tonight. The rain hit the glass. The piano somewhere in the hotel was still playing. Chopin, something from the nocturnes. She'd placed it about 2 minutes ago. The kind of playing that was technically competent and emotionally decorative and said nothing at all. She fixated on it for a moment because it was easier than the decision currently sitting in front of her. She did not know this man. She did not know his name before 10 minutes ago. She could not see his face. She could not read his expression, could not catch the micro movements around the eyes. Could not assess the body language that sighted people used to determine whether someone was lying, whether they were afraid, whether their confidence was real or performed. All she had was his voice, and his voice was controlled in a way that could mean danger or competence or both. Her father had died in a car accident. That's what they had told her. That's what the police report said. That's what her mother had believed until the day she died 3 years later from a grief that had turned into illness and then into something that the doctors called heart failure, but that Serena privately called a broken heart because she had no patience for euphemism when it came to her family. An accident. She had never questioned it. She'd had enough to carry. The blindness, the loss, the years of reconstruction, the music that she'd thrown herself into so completely that sometimes she thought she had built a new self entirely out of notes and practice hours, sealed the old Serena inside like something preserved in amber. An accident. He said he was worried about you. He said he had done things that made him worried about you. If you're lying to me, she said, I will find a way to make you regret it. I know, Dorian said. And it didn't sound like flattery. It sounded like information. She reached out her cane, oriented herself, and walked toward the sound of the lobby doors. Where are you going? A different voice, tense, positioned to her left, younger. One of the bodyguards. I'm assuming the car is out front, she said. Unless you park your armored vehicles somewhere special. A beat of silence. Then she heard Dorian Viscari moving behind her, and the controlled shift of the men around him as they repositioned, and the sound of the lobby reconfiguring itself around a new center of gravity. She didn't wait for him to lead. She pushed through the revolving door on her own. The rain hit her again immediately, relentless and cold, and she walked across the Hawthorne Regency's porte cochere toward the dull vibration of a large vehicle idling at the curb, and every instinct she had was screaming a different instruction, and she overrode all of them with the one thought that kept surfacing, slow and unstoppable as water through cracked stone. The accident that killed him was not an accident. Shub. The car was a Cadillac Escalade, black, long wheelbase, modified. She knew from the door weight and the way it sealed shut and the quality of the silence inside, the city noise just vanishing, replaced by the soft, climate-controlled hum of a vehicle built to survive something worse than traffic. Three people in the car besides her, Dorian in the seat to her left, someone in the passenger seat up front. She could hear his weight shifting, the low creak of leather, the fact that he didn't speak, which meant he was security. The driver, who also hadn't spoken, and whose driving was so smooth it felt practiced to the point of professional. She kept her cello case in her lap, both hands on it. "You're going to tell me everything," she said. "Yes." "Starting with how you knew my father." "Starting with who your father was," Dorian said. "They're not the same story." She turned toward him slightly. "Then start with who he was." "To you." A pause. Not hesitation exactly, more like he was choosing where to begin, the way you choose where to make a first cut when the incision has to be precise. "Your father was the smartest man I've ever known," Dorian said. And something in the way he said it, straight, no embellishment, the way people speak about the dead when they mean it, made something shift in her chest. He built financial systems that other people in my world had been trying to build for 20 years and couldn't. Complex structures, invisible structures, the kind of architecture that moves money across 5 continents without leaving tracks. "My father was an accountant," she said. "Your father was an accountant the way a surgeon is someone who cuts people." He let that sit. He used those skills in ways that were not legal, in ways that served an organization, my organization, for 9 years. The car was moving uptown, she could tell from the slight incline and the pattern of the turns. "He chose this," she said. It wasn't a question, but she needed to hear the answer. Initially, yes. He was approached, and he saw an opportunity, and he took it. Later, Dorian paused. Later it became more complicated. He wanted out, and leaving that kind of arrangement is not a process that other parties to the arrangement are typically enthusiastic about. He was trapped. He was managing this situation, in his way, which was careful, methodical. He was building something, an exit architecture, something that would let him walk away without leaving the kind of loose ends that get people killed. A beat. He didn't finish it in time. She pressed her thumbnail into the carbon fiber edge of the cello case, felt the small, bright pain of it. Corsetti's people had been watching your father for 2 years before they moved on him. They wanted the financial architecture, the encrypted ledgers, the account structures, the institutional relationships, because they wanted to absorb his network into their own. They offered to buy it. Your father declined. They were not accustomed to being declined. So they killed him. They came to the house that night to take him. The accident. He stopped. She heard something in the pause that she couldn't name. It was not planned to go the way it did. They ran his vehicle off the road intending to take him alive. The guardrail failed. He went into the ravine. She was very quiet for a long time. "I was in the car," she said. "I know. I was in the back seat." She said it slowly, the way you work through something when the working through has been deferred for years. "We were coming back from dinner. He'd taken me out for my birthday, just the two of us. I remember the restaurant. I remember what I ordered. I remember he'd been distracted all evening, kept checking his phone under the table and trying to pretend he wasn't. And then driving home, he was..." She stopped. "He wasn't himself. He was watching the mirrors." "He knew they were behind him," Dorian said quietly. "He knew." The word landed flat and strange. "He knew, and he didn't say anything to me. He just..." Her throat worked. "He just kept driving. He turned the radio on. I thought it was because he liked the song. It was Coltrane. He loved Coltrane, but he was..." She pressed the thumbnail harder. "He was trying to give me something to focus on besides what was happening. He was trying not to frighten you. I ended up blind." The silence after that had weight and texture. "I know," Dorian said. There was nothing else to say to that, and he knew it, and didn't try. She breathed, in and out, carefully. "You said you watched over me," she said. "The scholarships, the medical treatments." "Yes." "How long?" "Since the hospital." "Since I was 16. "Yes." "Why?" He took a moment with that. "Your father made me promise. In the last conversation I had with him, 6 weeks before he died, before they killed him, he said if anything happened, he needed someone to make sure you were intact, whole. He was afraid they'd come for you eventually if they couldn't find what they were looking for. I gave him my word that they wouldn't." He trusted a crime boss to protect his daughter. He trusted me specifically, Dorian said, and the distinction seemed important to him. We had an understanding, a longer relationship than money. Your father was one of the few people in 30 years of my life who spoke to me like I was worth something beyond what I could do for him. She didn't say anything. That matters, Dorian said. In my world, that kind of thing is rarer than you know. The car was slowing. They were underground. She could tell from the acoustics, the way sound bounced shorter and harder, no sky above, a parking structure. The medical treatments, she said, the experimental ones, in Berlin 3 years ago. That was you. Yes. She'd been told about the Berlin program through her ophthalmologist, who had been apologetic and hopeful in the particular way medical professionals are when they're presenting long odds. A regenerative nerve protocol at the Charité, experimental, expensive, covered by an anonymous foundation grant. She had spent 4 months in Berlin. The protocol had not worked. Her vision had not returned. It didn't work, she said. No. I looked it up once. The foundation that funded the program, they spent 400,000 euros on the research alone, not counting the residential costs. Yes. And it didn't work, and you just, moved on to the next option. There wasn't a next option, Dorian said. Not at that time. There may be one in the future. I have people watching the relevant research. She sat with that. She had spent years being angry about the blindness. Not constantly. She was not a person who lived in permanent anger. She'd done too much work for that. But in the specific dark hours, the hours before concerts, the hours when the loneliness of her particular experience of the world sat on her chest like a stone, she had been very angry. At the accident, at the absence of her parents, at the optic nerve that had simply stopped transmitting the world to her brain, arbitrarily, because a metal railing had failed on a wet road at 11:47 on a Thursday night. Not arbitrarily, not an accident, someone's choice, someone's decision. She felt the anger shift, reconfigure, locate a new address. Corsetti, she said. Yes. He's the reason my father is dead. Yes. He's the reason I'm blind. Yes. She set that down inside herself somewhere, filed it. Her hands on the cello case were steady. Tell me what he wants now, she said. What does he think I have? The car had stopped. She heard Dorian shift in his seat. Your father built the encrypted financial ledger over 9 years, he said. Every account, every institution, every relationship, every transaction, all of it coded in a system he designed himself. The key to the system, the decryption architecture, he never stored it digitally. Too vulnerable. He kept it in a form that couldn't be hacked, couldn't be seized, couldn't be found in a search. She waited. Corsetti has spent 8 years looking for it, Dorian said. And 3 days ago, his intelligence people identified a new possibility. A reason to believe the key might not be in a vault or a dead drop or a foreign bank. She heard the car door on Dorian's side open. He stepped out, came around to her side, opened the door. What new possibility? She said, not moving. He didn't answer immediately. The pause lasted long enough that she turned her face toward him, which she knew was a reflex that served no function but that she couldn't entirely suppress. You, he said. She felt the word land somewhere specific, somewhere between her sternum and her spine. He thinks I have it. He thinks your father gave it to you, Dorian said. And based on the intelligence I'm seeing, Corsetti may not be wrong. She didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then she stepped out of the car into the parking structure's cool, enclosed air, cane finding the floor, and she stood very straight with the cello case on her back and the rain still in her hair and the new information reorganizing itself inside her, shifting everything she thought she knew about her own life into a different formation, a different shape. Her father's voice. She had recordings of it, just a few, on her phone, the voicemails she'd never deleted. He had a particular way of talking to her about music that was different from how he talked about everything else. Slower, more careful, like he was trying to hand her something fragile. He had made her memorize things, long sequences of numbers and letters that he'd told her were musical compositions in a cipher system he had invented. Games, he'd called them. Brain exercises. He was always making her memorize things. Games. Her throat constricted. "Your people have a medical kit in this building," she said. "Yes." A flicker of something in his voice. "Are you hurt?" "No." She started walking toward where she could hear an elevator. "But I need a moment, alone, before you start explaining what you think I'm carrying inside my head and what you plan to do about it." "Of course." She stopped walking. "Viscari." "Yes." "If your people come into whatever room you put me in without my permission, I will break something expensive." She said it flat, matter of fact. "That's not a figure of speech." "I'll make sure they understand that," he said. And she heard it again. That quality in his voice that was not quite amusement, but was adjacent to a kind of respect, which was different from what she usually got, which was pity or efficiency or the particular over-careful gentleness that people used on her like a substitute for seeing her clearly. She walked to the elevator. The doors opened and she stepped in and the doors closed, and she was alone for the first time in 2 hours, in the smooth hush of an elevator ascending what the button panel, she found it with her fingers, read the braille, told her was 52 floors. She stood with her back against the elevator wall, put her hand over her mouth, let herself shake for exactly 32 seconds. Then she took her hand away, straightened her spine. The music she had memorized, the long sequences her father had called games, cipher systems, brain exercises, lived in a specific part of her memory, the deep structure part where muscle memory and pitch memory and perfect recall all coexisted. She had never tried to decode them. She hadn't known there was anything to decode. She began, very quietly, in the hush of the ascending elevator, to think about them differently. What her father had built inside her mind. What Dorian Viscari didn't know she was already beginning to understand. The elevator reached 52 and stopped. The doors opened onto a penthouse foyer that smelled like expensive air and controlled silence. Serena Vale walked into it with her cane and her cello and her dead father's secrets reorganizing themselves behind her eyes like a code beginning, finally, to become a language. And somewhere across the city, in the bedroom of her apartment on West 83rd Street, 2 men sat in the dark and waited. They did not know that the thing they'd been sent to find had been walking around New York in the body of a blind cellist for 8 years. They did not know that she was already starting to remember it. They did not know what that was going to cost them. 3 floors below the penthouse, in a secure operations room that Dorian Viscari used for the kind of conversations that didn't benefit from witnesses, a phone rang once. Grant Mercer, Dorian's most trusted captain, answered it on the second ring. The voice on the other end was flat and specific and said exactly 4 words. "She's in the building." Grant looked at the phone for a moment after the call ended. Then he put it in his pocket and went back upstairs to stand outside the room where the blind cellist was going to spend the night. His expression in the empty corridor was not what it would have been if Dorian could have seen it. The penthouse was too quiet. That was the first thing Serena registered when the door closed behind her. Not the size of the space, which she was mapping through the acoustic return of her cane taps against marble flooring, wide and high-ceilinged, a living room opening into what sounded like a longer corridor to the right. Not the temperature, which was controlled to the precise degree that money buys. The kind of air that didn't feel like weather, just absence of discomfort. Not the faint smell of leather and something faintly chemical, like cleaning products used on surfaces that didn't need cleaning but got cleaned anyway out of a need to control something. The quiet. The penthouse was 52 floors above Manhattan, and the storm was still out there. She knew it was. She'd felt it 20 minutes ago against her face. But up here the rain was just a rumor, a vibration in the glass that she could feel if she pressed her palm to a window but couldn't hear. As if the building had been designed specifically to insulate whoever lived here from the evidence that the rest of the world existed. She found the window by following the slight change in air temperature and pressed her palm flat against the glass. Cold. The storm still real on the other side. Good. She stood like that for almost a minute, just breathing, feeling the glass and the rain behind it and the 52 floors of engineered silence between her and the street below. Then she heard the door open behind her. Not her door. A room adjacent. Voices in the corridor say, 2 men, low, the words not quite distinct through the wall, but the tone absolutely readable. The clipped efficiency of people managing a situation, running through logistics, one voice that she recognized as the man from the passenger seat of the Escalade, and one voice she didn't recognize. She took her palm off the glass, crossed to the door of her room. She'd mapped it on the way in, 11 steps from the window, slightly left, and opened it without announcing herself. The two men in the corridor stopped talking. She didn't turn in their direction, just stood in the doorway. Let the silence do its work. She needs water, she said. A full glass, not a bottle. I won't know what I'm opening. And someone needs to tell me the layout of the bathroom before I find it myself and break something. A pause. Yes, ma'am? The Escalade passenger, young voice, disciplined. And I want to speak to Vescari. He's now. She went back inside and sat on the edge of the bed, cello case beside her, cane across her knees, and waited. She was good at waiting. She had spent years in the waiting rooms of specialists and the green rooms of concert halls and the particular suspended space of an airplane seat with noise-canceling headphones and a score in her head, and she had learned to make the waiting useful. She used it now. The sequences her father had made her memorize. There were 7 of them. She had not thought about them in years. They were simply there, the way childhood phone numbers are simply there, occupying some low-maintenance shelf of long-term memory. She began to reconstruct the first one now, not as she'd always experienced it, as an abstract pattern, a game, a puzzle with no stakes, but as what it might actually be. 43 characters. Letters and numbers interspersed in groups of 5 with a spacing structure that she'd always processed as rhythmic, musical, because her brain organized everything through music. She ran it again, and again, feeling for something underneath the pattern, an architecture. The door opened without knocking. I told your man, she started. My man relayed your message, Dorian Vescari's voice. He came in and she heard him stop a measured distance from where she was sitting, not close enough to crowd, not far enough to be diplomatic, just far enough to be choosing the distance deliberately. You wanted to speak to me. I want to know what you know about the ledger. I told you what I know. You told me what you think I know. I want to know what you know. She turned her face toward him. Your father built the financial architecture. Did you look for the ledger after he died? For 3 years. And? Nothing. No physical record, no digital record, no encrypted drive, no offshore safe deposit. Your father built something with no physical existence. A pause. I assumed he'd destroyed it. You assumed. I was wrong. What changed 3 days ago? What intelligence did Corsetti get that pointed to me? He moved. She heard him shift weight, heard the faint sound of him sitting in the chair near the window, putting the width of the room between them in a way that felt considered. Corsetti's people found a man named Ellis Pruitt. He was a digital forensics specialist your father used in the final 2 years of his work with us. He identified an anomaly in the system architecture, a mirror structure that wasn't connected to any physical storage medium, but had the profile of something that was regularly read, accessed, recalled from somewhere. Pruitt told Corsetti's people he thought the architecture was designed to be stored mnemonically. Mawsum. The word landed exactly where it should, mnemonically. My father taught me to memorize things, she said, very carefully. I know. You knew before tonight. I suspected, for the last 3 days. She held the cane across her knees, very still. And you didn't think to call me, to warn me, to give me some kind of... I was building an extraction plan. You needed 3 days, she said, and her voice came out flat and very cold, while men were sitting in my apartment. She let that sit. While I was going to my rehearsals and making my coffee and walking my 11 blocks to the subway, you were building a plan. I was also keeping Corsetti's people from moving on you too early. If I'd pulled you before I had the penthouse secured... Don't manage me, she said. Don't explain the operational logic. I'm asking you why you didn't tell me the truth about my father 8 years ago, and why you didn't tell me I was in danger 3 days ago, and the answer is the same answer, isn't it? Not a question. Because you decided I couldn't handle it. A long silence. Yes, he said. She had expected him to argue. The honesty threw her for a half second, and she didn't let it show. Say the rest of it. You were 16 when it happened, then you were 17 and in a rehabilitation facility learning to navigate without your sight. Then you were 18 and in a conservatory that had accepted you on the strength of recordings your father made before he died. Then you were building something, a life, a career. I watched you build it, and it was... He stopped, started again differently. Disrupting that had a cost that I calculated against the alternative. The alternative being that no one had found the missing key in 8 years, and there was no indication anyone would. Until 3 days ago. Until 3 days ago. So the calculation changed. Yes. She sat with that. The anger was still there, would stay there for a while. She knew herself well enough to know it. But she set it aside for the moment because anger wasn't useful yet. Analysis was useful. The 7 sequences in her memory were useful. The sequences my father made me memorize, she said. How many does Corsetti know about? His people know the architecture was stored mnemonically. They don't know the specific content. So they need me alive. For now, yes. That's a temporary condition. That is a temporary condition, Dorian agreed, and she heard something in his voice that she hadn't heard yet. Not quite fear. He didn't seem like a man who used that word even internally, but a proximity to it. A tightness. Which is why you are here. Someone knocked. Once. Come in, Dorian said. The door opened. Footsteps. 2 sets. Someone set something down on the table near the door. Water glass, from the sound of it. The footsteps retreated. The door closed. Serena stood and crossed to the table and found the glass and drank half of it standing there and set it down. The traitor in your organization, she said. Silence. There is one, she said. Someone gave Corsetti's people my schedule. The men in my apartment knew I'd be at rehearsal today, which means they knew my schedule, which means they had access to information that's not public. My rehearsal times are on an internal calendar that my manager keeps. They're not posted anywhere. What makes you think that's from my side and not your manager's? Because my manager is a 63-year-old woman named Patricia Huang, who has worked in classical music for 40 years and has never met a crime boss in her life. If Corsetti's people got to her, they'd have had to identify her, approach her, compromise her, and do it within the last few weeks when my name became relevant to them. She turned toward where he was sitting. That takes time. Whereas someone in your organization has known my identity, my schedule, my location for years. The silence that followed was different from the previous silences. Denser. That possibility has occurred to me, he said. Do you know who? I have a short list. How short? 3 names. Tell me. No? She almost laughed, not from amusement. Why? Because you're in my house and I don't know you, he said. And the way he said it was completely even. No apology in it, no softening. Your father's daughter, yes. Someone my people have protected for years, yes. But you walked in 2 hours ago out of a rainstorm, and I am not in the habit of trusting people I don't know with operational intelligence. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to be safe. I'm not asking you to trust me. Those are not the same thing. No, he said. They're not. The chair shifted. He was standing. Get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. The bathroom is through the door on your left. I'll have Reyes walk you through the layout before he goes off shift. Vescari. He stopped. The sequences are mine, she said. Whatever my father put inside my memory, it belongs to me. Not to you, not to Corsetti. Whatever you're planning, I want that understood before we go any further. A pause. Understood, he said. I'm not a vault you're retrieving. I'm not an asset you're securing. I'm a person who woke up this morning with a completely different understanding of her own life than she has right now, and I need... Her voice threatened to fracture very briefly, and she killed it before it could. I need you to remember that. He said nothing for a moment. Then, your father said almost exactly those words to me once. Not to be treated as a function, to be seen as a person first. She didn't respond to that. She heard him leave. She stood in the room for a long time after the door closed and let the penthouse quiet sit on her and worked on the first sequence in the dark behind her eyes and felt something shift, very slightly, in the architecture of it. The way a tuning string moves when it finds the right pitch. Not there yet, but approaching. Approaching the note her father had buried inside her years ago and never told her was real. She did not sleep for a long time. Dorian Viscari stood at the window of his study and watched the storm abuse Manhattan and drank 2 fingers of scotch he didn't want. The study was 1 floor above the guest level, connected by a private staircase. Floor-to-ceiling glass on the north and east faces. He had never liked curtains, had never liked the idea that the city could exist outside his awareness, even when he wasn't watching it. Old habit, the kind of habit that had kept him alive since he was 23 years old and running errands for men who'd since died badly. Grant Mercer was standing near the door. Grant had been with him for 11 years. Before that, Dorian's uncle, the man who had built the East Coast operation from a borrowed loft in Red Hook and $30,000 and a willingness to absorb violence that most men found disqualifying. Grant had been his uncle's man first, had transitioned his loyalty when the uncle died of a stroke in 2019, had managed the transition to Dorian's leadership of the organization with the kind of professional smoothness that Dorian had found, at the time, impressively clean. He looked at Grant now. Grant was watching him with that specific quality of attention that Dorian had learned to read over 11 years. The watchful competence of a man who was always assessing, always calculating, always processing the room for information that would be useful to him. It was a quality Dorian valued in his people. It was also, he was beginning to understand, a quality that served multiple masters equally well. "The woman is secure," Grant said. "Yes. Corsetti's people moved on her apartment at 6:15. They've been there 9 hours. When they find out she's not coming back, they'll start looking." "I know. We should consider moving her. A secondary location." Dorian turned from the window. "Why?" "This building is known. Corsetti's intelligence is good. If he's got someone in my organization," Dorian said evenly, "moving her to a secondary location just means that person tells Corsetti where the secondary location is." Grant's expression didn't change. That was, Dorian noted, worth noting. 11 years of working together, and Grant's face still moved on demand, not on impulse. A controlled man, useful quality. Useful quality. "What do you want to do?" Grant said. "Nothing tonight. Tomorrow we assess what she knows about the sequences. Then we make decisions." "And Corsetti?" "Corsetti is going to make a move in the next 48 hours. He doesn't have patience for extended operations." Dorian set down his glass. "I want 3 additional men on the guest level overnight. Ray is on the door. Nobody in or out without my direct authorization." "Understood. That means nobody," Dorian said, and held Grant's eyes for a half-second longer than necessary. "Not for any reason." Grant nodded. "Understood." He left. Dorian turned back to the window. The scotch was still on the side table. He didn't pick it up again. He was thinking about a conversation he'd had 9 years ago. A man named Pruitt, Ellis Pruitt, Digital Forensics, the same name that had come up 3 days ago in his intelligence briefing, who had approached Dorian's organization 2 years after Marcus Vale's death with an offer to help reconstruct what had been lost. Dorian had declined. He'd had reasons for declining that had seemed sound at the time. He was reviewing them now and finding several of them less sound than he remembered. He was also thinking about the fact that 3 days ago, when Pruitt's name had come up again, this time in connection with Corsetti, the intelligence had come from Grant. Grant's source, Grant's report, Grant's framing of the threat. He reached for his phone, pulled up a number he hadn't used in 14 months, a woman named Yoon who ran the organization's internal security function and who reported directly to Dorian and to no one else. He typed a message. 3 words. "Run Mercer again." He put the phone down. The storm outside was beginning to ease slightly. Or maybe he was just getting used to it. She found it at 3 a.m. Not all of it. 1 thread. 1 sequence. The third one, which she'd always processed as a long ascending phrase, modally ambiguous, the kind of thing a music teacher assigns to develop tonal memory, turned out, when she approached it as something other than music, to contain a structure underneath the surface pattern. A matrix. A key generator of some kind, which she recognized from a course she'd taken her sophomore year at the conservatory on the history of cryptography, required for a music history elective in coded composition techniques. She'd taken it because the professor was interesting, not because she'd thought it would matter. Her father had known she would take it, or had built something she'd find through any one of a dozen possible paths if she ever looked at it correctly. That thought, the patience of it, the length of vision it implied, sat in her chest like a stone that was also somehow a comfort. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed with the cello case open beside her. She'd done it out of habit, some need to have the instrument present, the familiar smell of the wood and rosin. She wasn't playing, just sitting with it. The sequence in her memory kept rotating. She was not a cryptographer. She did not have the tools to extract what was embedded in it, not sitting in an unfamiliar room at 3 a.m. with only her own brain. But she could see the shape of it now, the outline of the architecture. Her father had not given her a key. He had given her several hundred keys, and somewhere in the arrangement of those keys was something that would open every locked account, every hidden structure, every coded transaction in a financial network that spanned 5 continents and had been built over 9 years by the most careful, patient, brilliant man she had ever known. She put her hand on the body of the cello. "What did you do, Dad?" she said, very quietly. "To the room, to the 42 pounds of spruce and maple, to the 10-year absence that had never gotten smaller. What did you hide in me?" The penthouse was silent. From somewhere in the corridor outside, very faint, the near inaudible sound of a footstep that was trying not to be heard. She went very still. She had grown up since the accident with a hearing that had compensated for what her eyes could no longer do. Not superhuman, she had no patience for that framing, the blind person with magical senses narrative that sighted people seemed to find comforting, but trained and attentive and oriented toward the specific quality of sounds that didn't belong in the spaces they were in. The footstep in the corridor was wrong, not the steady, slightly bored pacing of a security man on a doorpost, not the crisp, purposeful movement of someone going from A to B on an errand. It was slow, and it was deliberate, and it had the quality of weight being managed carefully, step by someone who did not want to exist in the soundscape of this corridor. She set her hand on the cane, a second footstep, closer to her door. Then, she had to work to identify this, to separate it from the residual white noise of the building's HVAC, the faint high pitch of a phone notification suppressed, vibration only, the brief throb of a device receiving a message, carrying through the floor, reaching her through the mattress and the frame and the thin buffer of carpeted floor. Someone in the corridor had just received a message at 3 a.m. and had not gone to answer it in a more distant location, had stayed exactly where they were. She closed the cello case as quietly as she knew how, which was very quietly, lifted the cane, stood, moved backward until her shoulders found the wall beside the headboard, not the wall beside the door, the far wall, giving herself maximum distance and maximum knowledge of the room geometry. Her cane had a blade. She had not mentioned this to Dorian Vescari. The blade had been her father's design, not in the cane she was using now, but in the cane she'd had at 17, the first one after the accident, which had arrived anonymously in a package with no return address 2 months after she'd left the rehabilitation facility. Her father had been dead for over a year by then. She had understood when she found the mechanism that he had arranged it before he died, that he had known she would need it, that his patience and his love and his terror for her safety had all occupied the same space in his chest. She had transferred the mechanism to 4 different canes over the years, always the same design, same blade length, same deployment trigger in the grip. She stood against the far wall and listened and waited. The door handle moved, very slowly. Downward pressure, the latch beginning to release. She stopped breathing. The door opened 1 inch. 2. A thin bar of corridor light fell across the floor. She tracked the geometry, placed herself outside its edge. Then, just before the door could open further, a second set of footsteps in the corridor, fast, confident, coming from the direction of the elevator. "Reyes," Dorian Vescari's voice, low and absolutely controlled. "Why are you off the door?" A pause. "Bathroom break, sir. I was only back on the door." Another pause. Shorter. "Yes, sir." The door, still cracked open 1 inch, 2 inches, the bar of light still lying across the floor, stopped moving. She heard someone breathing on the other side of it, heard the breath regulate itself, heard the door ease back, very carefully, very slowly, until the latch caught with a sound that was trying very hard to be nothing at all. She stood against the wall for another full minute. Then she crossed to the door and set her back against it, and pushed the small lever on the grip of her cane and felt the blade extend 3 inches past the tip and lock. And she sat down on the floor with her back against the door and the locked blade across her knees and the 7 sequences cycling through her memory and the full weight of what her father had made her into pressing down on her chest like the opening chord of something enormous and dangerous and entirely without resolution. In the corridor outside, she could hear Dorian Viscari's footsteps moving away, going back toward the elevator, and behind them, quieter, the sound of a different man standing very still, waiting. She knew what that sound meant. She had just heard someone open her door in the middle of the night, and she could not prove it, and she could not identify which of the 3 names on Dorian's list it had been, and she was 52 floors above the street in a penthouse belonging to a man she'd met 4 hours ago, and the city outside was still. She did not sleep. She sat on the floor with her back against the door until the quality of the silence outside changed. The particular shift that happens between 4 and 5 in the morning when the city's lowest register drops out, and what's left is something thinner, something that sounds like exhaustion rather than quiet. She tracked it the way she tracked everything, measured it, used it to stay oriented inside a building that was not hers, in a situation that had stopped being navigable by any map she'd been given. The blade stayed locked. At 5:43, she heard the elevator open on the floor above her. Footsteps descending the private staircase. A knock, different from last night's. Knuckles, deliberate. The knock of someone announcing themselves rather than testing a door. "It's Reyes." The young voice, controlled. "Mr. Vescari asked if you'd come up for breakfast." She stood. Her back ached from the floor. She didn't show it. "Give me 10 minutes." She used the 10 minutes to wash her face and change into the clothes that had been left folded outside her bathroom door sometime before dawn. She'd heard the soft placement of them, had noted it without responding. Dark jeans, a gray sweater, both close enough to her size that whoever had sourced them had either guessed well or had access to information about her they shouldn't have had. She filed that. Everything went in the file. She retracted the blade, buttoned the cane grip closed, checked it twice. Then she went upstairs. The kitchen was large and smelled like coffee and something being cooked in butter. She found a stool at the counter island by trailing her cane along the cabinet edge and sat. Somebody set a mug in front of her. She found the handle, drank. Good coffee. The kind that costs money and tastes like it. Dorian was already there. She could tell from the specific quality of silence that organized itself around him, the way a room's ambient sound rearranges when someone with a certain kind of authority occupies it. He was standing, she thought, near the window on the east side. "You were up," she said. "Yes." "You came back to the guest level at 3 a.m. "Yes." "Why?" A pause. Something set down on a hard surface. A mug, probably. Internal security flagged an anomaly on the floor sensor. Weight distribution inconsistent with a single guard on post. "Someone was at my door," she said. The kitchen went very still. "Tell me exactly what you heard," he said. The professional control in his voice had tightened by 1 degree. She could hear it, the way a string sounds different when you increase the tension by a quarter turn. Still controlled, tighter, she told him. The footstep quality, the door handle, the suppressed phone notification, the way whoever it was had retreated when Dorian's voice appeared in the corridor. She told it straight, in sequence, without editorializing, the way she organized musical information. Structure first, interpretation after. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet for a long time. "You slept on the floor," he said. "Against the door." "Yes." "With your cane." "With my cane." Another pause. She heard him set something down. Heard him move, 2 steps toward the island. He stopped on the other side of the counter from her. "There are 3 people with overnight access to the guest level," he said. "Reyes, Mercer, and a man named Castillo who runs the building security desk." "You said 3 names last night. Your short list." "Yes." "Mercer is on it." It wasn't a question. She heard the answer in the fractional delay before he spoke. "Mercer is on it," he said. "He's your most trusted captain." "He was." She wrapped both hands around the coffee mug. "You ran him." "I asked Yoon, my internal security chief, to pull a background review last night after our conversation. She called me at 2:45 with preliminary findings. He stopped, started again more carefully. Mercer has a financial account we didn't know about, established 14 months ago. Offshore, layered through 3 jurisdictions. The incoming deposits align with dates on which Corsetti's organization made operational moves that, in retrospect, corresponded to intelligence only available from inside my organization. She was very still. 14 months, she said. Yes. He's been feeding Corsetti your intelligence for 14 months. Yes. And you're only finding out now. The half-second delay again. Yes. She put the mug down. Not hard. Carefully. 14 months ago. What happened 14 months ago that made Grant Mercer decide to switch sides? Silence. Viscari. She turned her face toward where he was standing. What happened 14 months ago? I promoted him, Dorian said. His voice was absolutely flat. I gave him full operational authority over the Eastern Division. Access to all financial structures, all strategic planning, all intelligence assets. A pause. And 3 weeks after I gave him that access, I began restructuring the organization's financial architecture, moving toward legitimate enterprises, reducing the scope of criminal operations. He saw his future changing. He saw his value to me changing. The Eastern Division under the new structure was going to be a real estate management operation and 2 logistics companies. Clean, legal, boring. He said the last word with a precision that meant something specific. Mercer is not a man built for boring. She sat with that. So he found a buyer for what he knew. Corsetti made him an offer. Whatever it was, he took it. And now Corsetti knows I'm here. We have to assume yes. She stood up from the stool. Then we don't have time for breakfast. Serena, where is Mercer right now? A beat. He's in the operations room, 2 floors down. He came in at 6 for the morning briefing. He doesn't know, you know. Not yet. Keep it that way, she said. I need an hour. For what? She reached for her cane, oriented herself toward the staircase. I've been working on the sequences since 3 a.m. There's something in the third one, a matrix structure underneath the surface pattern. I need a laptop, a quiet room, and someone who can run a basic frequency analysis without asking me questions about why. I can do the frequency analysis myself. That stopped her. She turned back. Your father didn't only teach you things, Dorian said. He taught me things too. Not the music, but the methodology. A pause that felt different from his other pauses. Older, more worn. We spent 18 months building the original system together. I understand the architecture even if I can't access it. She stood very still. This was new information. Significant information. She held it up against the light inside her head and looked at the shape of it. The implication that Dorian Viscari had not been a passive employer of her father's skills, but an active collaborator. That the financial system they'd built together was partly his design. That whatever he'd told her last night about not knowing where the key was stored had been true, but had excluded something important. That he'd known what the key would look like when it was found. You should have told me that last night, she said. Yes, he said. I should have. Why didn't you? Because you were already deciding how much to trust me, and adding that information into the equation felt like... He stopped. It felt like it would tip the scale in a direction I wasn't confident I'd earned. She breathed in, breathed out. It might have, she said, but I would rather have the true scale than a managed one. I know that now. She turned back toward the staircase. Get me a laptop and meet me in the study in 20 minutes. And don't tell Mercer anything until we know what we're looking at. Understood. She went down the stairs with her cane and her dead father's codes reorganizing themselves behind her eyes, and the specific cold resolve of someone who has been sitting on a floor all night waiting for something to happen and has decided definitively to stop waiting. The study was on the same level as the guest floor, at the end of the corridor. She'd mapped it the night before without entering it. Dorian arrived 11 minutes after her. She heard him set a laptop on the desk and position a chair. Screen reader? Already enabled. She sat, pulled the laptop toward her. The screen reader's voice came through the speaker at low volume. She was used to interfacing this way, had spent 6 years navigating professional music notation software with adaptive tools, had no patience for the people who found it impressive. "The third sequence," she said. "I'm going to narrate it. I need you to transcribe." "Ready." She ran the sequence from memory. 43 characters grouped in fives. She said each group with the spacing and rhythm her father had given it. Dorian typed. She heard the keys. He was fast, accurate, didn't interrupt. "Read it back." He read it back. One error. A transposed pair in the 7th group. She corrected it. "Now," she said, "run a frequency analysis. Count the occurrence of each character. Then map the numerical values against a modular arithmetic base. Try base 12 first. My father had a theory about base 12 systems in musical composition." "How do you know that?" "He wrote an essay about it when I was 12. I read it to him out loud because his reading glasses were broken. I have it memorized because I have everything memorized." She said it without pride, just fact. "Base 12. Run it." He worked in silence. She listened to the keyboard and the soft breath of the laptop fan and the city beginning outside the glass. Distant traffic, something helicoptering to the south, the specific hum of a Tuesday morning in Manhattan deciding to exist. "There's a pattern," he said. It came out quiet, like he'd been expecting it and was still surprised. "What kind?" "A mapping structure. Every 6th character resolves to a value between 1 and 48. He paused. 48 banks. That's the number of institutional relationships your father built into the network." She nodded slowly. "The sequence isn't a key. It's an index." "An index to what?" "To the other sequences." She turned toward him. "I have 7. If this one maps the institutions, the others map the account structures, the authorization codes, the transaction protocols. The complete system isn't in any one sequence. It's distributed across all 7. You can't reconstruct the ledger with one. You need all of them in the right order. And you have all 7. "I have all 7. The silence lasted a moment. Then the door to the study opened. She turned immediately. The footstep was wrong. Not Reyes, not any of the security rotation she'd been cataloging since last night. Heavier. Deliberate in a different way. The deliberateness of someone who'd already decided what they were going to do when they came through the door. She smelled him before she fully processed it. A specific combination of a particular brand of cedar-based deodorant and gun oil and the faint chemical smell of latex gloves being pulled off quickly, which she heard in the dry snap of the material. Grant Mercer said, "Step away from the desk, Dorian." She heard Dorian stand, heard the specific controlled quality of his breath, heard the thing underneath the control. Not fear, not from him, but a kind of grief that came from 11 years of trust arriving at its actual destination. "Grant," he said, "step away." Mercer's voice was clear and unhurried. "I'm not going to hurt either of you in here. I just need the sequence data, and then I'm gone." "You heard us," Dorian said. "I was in the corridor for the last 6 minutes. Your man Reyes is currently zip-tied in the bathroom down the hall. Castillo is unconscious at the security desk. This floor is mine for approximately 20 minutes before the next rotation comes up." A pause. "I don't want it to go badly. Give me what I need." "There's nothing to give," Dorian said. She narrated it verbally. "There's no file." Then she narrates it to me. Serena had not moved. She was sitting at the desk with her hands in her lap and her cane against the desk edge and the laptop open in front of her, and her mind running at a speed she rarely let herself fully access because it was exhausting, and because it outpaced what the body could keep up with, and because in ordinary life there was no need for it. This was not ordinary life. She said, "What did Corsetti offer you?" A beat. Mercer had not expected her to speak. "That's not your business." "Money," she said. "Obviously money. But how much? Enough to retire, or enough to build something? Because those are different kinds of men, and I need to know which one you are." "Serena," Dorian's voice had a warning in it. "Enough to build something," Mercer said. And the speed of the answer told her it was true. Full operational authority over Corsetti's northern territory, the Connecticut corridor up through Boston, clean structure, real infrastructure. "You wanted your own operation," she said. "I built Dorian's operation for 11 years. And he was making it boring." A pause. "He was making it disappear. So you found someone who wanted to keep it what it was." I found someone who understood what it was worth. She turned her face toward where Mercer was standing. Corsetti killed my father. I know. You're working for the man who killed my father, ran my vehicle off a road, and left me blind at 16. The pause this time was different, slightly longer. The specific length of a pause in which a person reassesses how much the other person knows. That's history. That's not personal to me. It's extraordinarily personal to me, she said, very calmly. So I want you to understand that I am going to give you exactly nothing, and that whatever you think is going to happen in the next 20 minutes, you are miscalculating. Lady, Mercer said, and the patience in his voice had hardened at the edges. You are a blind musician sitting at a desk. I have a weapon and you don't, and Dorian is 10 feet away from you, and the only people who know we're on this floor are unconscious or zip-tied. What exactly am I miscalculating? She heard Dorian shift, just slightly, moving by a degree in her direction, which she understood and needed him not to do. Dorian, she said, don't. He stopped. Stay exactly where you are, she said, both of you. Her right hand found the grip of the cane against the desk edge. She didn't pick it up yet, just found it. Let her fingers settle around the grip the way they settled around a bow. Not tight, not loose, the particular calibrated hold of something about to move. The thing about being blind, she said to Mercer, conversationally, is that you develop a very precise model of any room you've spent time in. The desk is 42 inches wide. The door is 7 feet behind you. The wall to your left is 9 feet from where you're standing, and there's a credenza there. I heard the sound profile change when you walked past it, which means it's heavy wood, which means it doesn't move. The chair I'm sitting in rolls. She paused. I know where everything is in this room. You know where you are and where we are. That's where your model ends. It ends at the gun, Mercer said. That simplifies the model considerably. You said you didn't want it to go badly. I don't. Then listen carefully. She lifted her cane from the desk, held it horizontal across her knees under the desk's surface where he couldn't see it. I'm going to give you one sequence. One. Not the index. A fragment. Something you can take to Corsetti as proof of access. Enough to buy yourself time with him while we work out an alternative arrangement. There's no alternative arrangement. There's always an alternative arrangement. You've been in this business long enough to know that. She turned toward Dorian. Tell him I'm right. Dorian was quiet for 2 seconds. She could feel him working through it. She's right. This is... Mercer stopped. She heard his weight shift. He was thinking. The gun was still up. She could tell from the quality of his voice, the angle, the way a person's posture changes when they're holding weight at shoulder height. One sequence, one fragment. Enough to verify authenticity, not enough to reconstruct anything. She paused. And then you call Corsetti and tell him you have a direct line to the full ledger through me, which means I need to be alive and cooperative, which means your standing with him goes up substantially if you can deliver that. Why would you cooperate with Corsetti? I wouldn't, but you'd have a week, maybe 2, of elevated standing while he tried to establish the channel. That's time to make other arrangements. She turned her face toward the cane in her lap, turned it back. Or you can try to take the information by force from a woman who has it stored in her memory, which is not a problem you can solve with a gun. A long silence. One fragment, Mercer said. One fragment. She heard him take a step closer to the desk. Heard him reach toward the laptop, she thought, wanting to record, or type, or have something physical to take away. He leaned across the desk. She had 4 feet of open air between the desk edge and where he'd positioned himself. She had grown up doing a thing her father had called listening geometry, mapping the 3-dimensional positions of sounds in real time, maintaining a dynamic model of a moving space. She had done it for 10 years in concert halls, in rehearsal rooms, in crowded city streets. She had done it last night on the lobby floor of the Hawthorne Regency. She was doing it now at a granularity that Mercer, who could see and therefore didn't have to listen with this precision, could not access and could not predict. She stood and she moved, and it was not the movement of a blind musician at a desk. She drove the tip of the cane, blade locked, 3 inches of hardened steel past the rubber, into the underside of Mercer's gun hand at the precise angle that forced the wrist into hyperextension. She heard the weapon leave his grip before he processed what was happening. heard it hit the floor and skid left. She followed the momentum through, stepping inside his reach. She was close now, too close for the gun even if he retrieved it, which he wouldn't because she was between him and the floor, and brought the cane grip up hard into the hinge of his jaw. He went sideways into the credenza. She heard him hit it. The heavy wood absorbed the impact, didn't move, and heard him start to recover faster than she'd expected, which meant trained, which meant she didn't have the luxury of a second assessment. She followed immediately, no hesitation, tracking his sound, his breathing, his weight on the floor, the scrape of his shoe as he tried to get his feet under him, and brought the cane blade down across the meat of his forearm in a controlled draw cut that wasn't deep but was immediately and comprehensively painful in a way that centralized his nervous system's attention away from his legs and his recovery. He went down. Not unconscious. On his knees, one hand on the credenza, breathing in the specific pattern of someone managing acute pain, which she knew because she had studied it, because her father had made her study it, because her father had been a careful man who had loved his daughter and been absolutely terrified for her future. She stood over him with the blade extended and her breathing even and her model of the room updated in real time. Dorian Viscari had not moved. She could hear him, hadn't moved, hadn't gone for the weapon on the floor, hadn't tried to intervene. She didn't know what his face looked like right now. She didn't need to. She said to Mercer, very quietly, "The fragment I was going to give you was false. There are no alternative arrangements, and I have known where this was going since you opened your mouth. Because you came through that door having already decided, and men who've already decided don't negotiate." Mercer's breathing was ragged. "How?" He stopped. Tried again. "How did you know where—" "I've been mapping this room since I sat down," she said. "I've been mapping every room since I was 16 years old." She stepped back one step, maintaining the blade angle, keeping him grounded in the specific geography of the pain. "Dorian, the gun." She heard him cross the room, heard him pick it up from the floor, heard the safety engage. "Call Yoon," she said. "Tell her we have the leak. Tell her we need the floor secured." Dorian made the call. She stood over Grant Mercer and listened to him breathe and felt the blade's weight in her wrist and thought about her father's voice on those old voicemails, the specific timbre of it, the Coltrane playing in the dark of a car on the Palisades while her father watched his mirrors and decided not to tell her what was coming. He had decided to hide it from her. He had hidden so many things from her for so many years out of love and terror and the particular arrogance of a man who believed he could manage every outcome if he just stayed careful enough. He had not stayed careful enough. She was not going to make that mistake. "Mercer," she said. He looked up at her. She couldn't see it, but she felt the shift in his weight, the orientation of his face toward hers. "Corsetti knows I am in this building," she said. "You confirmed it when you told him, so we have until he decides to move, which, based on what Dorian told me about his operational style, is no more than 48 hours. She crouched down to his level. A deliberate decision, reducing the physical distance, increasing the pressure of proximity. "So here's what you're going to do. You're going to tell me everything Corsetti knows, everything he's planning, and every asset he has positioned in this city. You are going to tell me because the alternative is that I walk out of this building with everything I'm carrying in my memory and disappear, and Corsetti never gets what he wants, and you go back to him empty-handed." "You can't disappear," Mercer said. His voice was tight with pain. "You're blind. Say the next word carefully," she said. He didn't say it. "I have been disappearing into the city since I was 17 years old," she said. "I know how to vanish into a place that doesn't think I can navigate it. The only thing keeping me in this building right now is the fact that I want to end this. Not survive it, end it." She let that sit. "So you can help me end it, or you can help Corsetti delay it. Those are the options I'm offering." The room was quiet. She heard Mercer's breathing, heard him calculating. The specific quality of a man's silence when the structures he'd built his decision on have just been identified and named and left without cover. "His stronghold," Mercer said finally. "The Financial Exchange building on Broad Street. The old Meridian Exchange. It's been vacant for 6 years. Corsetti runs his operation out of the sub-basement. There are 12 men on site at any given time, rotating shifts. The building has no registered security contract because registering a security contract creates a record," Dorian said from behind her. "Yes." Mercer's voice was getting steadier. The pain management was kicking in, the professional override of physical sensation that trained men develop. He has a meeting there in 36 hours, a financial summit, 3 other organizations, reviewing the ledger acquisition. If he doesn't have the ledger by then, he loses credibility, Dorian said. He loses the alliance. All 3 organizations pull out. His expansion into the Northeast Corridor collapses. Mercer paused. He's been building this for 2 years. The ledger is the centerpiece. Without it, he has nothing to show them. Serena stood up. 36 hours. She turned away from Mercer and faced the room and let the information settle into the architecture she was building inside her head. The sequences, the meeting, the building on Broad Street, the 12 men in the sub-basement of a vacant financial exchange. The man who had killed her father was sitting in a sub-basement 36 hours from the collapse of everything he'd spent 2 years constructing. She was standing in a penthouse 52 floors above Manhattan with the complete financial architecture of his empire inside her memory. And she had just revealed to a room to Dorian Vescari, who was standing behind her with a weapon, who she had known for less than 12 hours, who had watched over her for 10 years from a distance and lied to her about her father and funded her life, and failed to warn her when the danger arrived, that she was not what either of them had believed her to be. The woman who had been afraid in the elevator last night, who had shaken for 32 seconds and then stopped, who had sat on the floor behind a locked door with a blade across her knees. She was still here. She had not gone anywhere. But she was not only that woman. Yoon's team will be here in 4 minutes, Dorian said. Good. She didn't turn around. I need a map of Lower Manhattan and everything your organization knows about the Meridian Exchange building. I need it in the next 2 hours. What are you planning? She picked up the cane from the floor where she'd set it after the blade work, closed the blade, gripped the handle. I'm planning to give Raphael Corsetti exactly what he's been looking for, she said. Every code, every account, every key my father hid inside me. She turned toward the door. And then I'm going to make sure he never gets to it. She had 36 hours, and she used 2 of them sitting at the desk in the study with Dorian's map spread across the surface in front of her, while he narrated every detail she couldn't see. She made him narrate it twice. The Meridian Exchange building on Broad Street was 11 stories of Beaux-Arts limestone that had processed the financial transactions of 3 generations of New York commerce before the digital age made its trading floor obsolete. Vacant since 2019, the sub-basement ran the full footprint of the building. 4,000 square feet of reinforced concrete, original vault infrastructure, 1 freight elevator, 2 stairwells, no windows. The kind of space that absorbed sound the way it absorbed light, completely, without return. Mercer had given them the shift rotation. 12 men, 4-hour cycles, 3 overlapping teams. The freight elevator required a key card that cycled every 24 hours. The stairwells had pressure sensors on the 3rd and 7th steps. The sub-basement itself had 2 entry points, the elevator and a secondary stairwell on the building's south side that Corsetti's people used for supply delivery, which meant it was alarmed but not watched continuously because the people running the operation had confused alarmed with protected, which was a mistake that men in comfortable sub-basements made more often than they should. The south stairwell, she said. It's alarmed. I know. What's the alarm system? Dorian pulled something up on his laptop. She heard the keyboard. Meridian Security Solutions. Legacy system, early 2000s. Hardwired, not networked. Which means cutting the power cuts the alarm without triggering a cellular backup signal. She said it before he could finish. What's the building's power source? Grid connection plus a backup generator. The generator is on the roof. If we take the generator offline before we cut the grid, the backup fails to engage. The alarm goes dark. She paused. How long does the alarm panel take to register the outage and send a physical alert to whoever's monitoring? Hardwired systems from that era typically run a 60 to 90-second lag before the monitoring service escalates. 90 seconds to get into the south stairwell and pass the pressure sensors on the steps. She stood up from the desk. That's enough. Serena. Dorian said her name the way he'd said it in the hotel lobby, like he'd said it before in other rooms. There are 12 armed men in that basement. There are 12 armed men who are expecting a meeting tomorrow that requires them to have what I'm carrying, which means tonight, before the meeting, they're in a holding pattern, waiting, which means their attention is inward. on the meeting logistics, on the preparation, on Corsetti, not outward, not toward the south stairwell. She turned toward him. We don't need to go through 12 men. We need to go through the room where Corsetti is. That's not a simpler problem. No, she said, but it's a solvable one. He was quiet for a moment. She could hear him looking at the maps, hear him working through it the way she worked through a difficult passage, not intellectually, but physically, in the body, running the sequence until the hands knew what the mind had decided. I'm going with you, he said. I know. And I need you to tell me the full plan before we go in, not fragments, the whole thing. She turned back to the desk and put her hand on the surface and felt the edge of the map paper under her fingers. The plan is this. We go in through the south stairwell. We reach the sub-basement. I walk into that room and I give Raphael Corsetti exactly what he wants. Every code, every sequence narrated in full. I give it to him completely and without resistance. The silence that followed was long and specific. And then, she said, Yoon's team executes the secondary protocol. What secondary protocol? The one I need you to authorize in the next 30 minutes. She turned toward him fully. The financial accounts my father built, 48 institutions, full network. Yoon needs to make simultaneous contact with the compliance departments of all 48 in the next 12 hours. Not law enforcement, compliance, internal. She gives them a specific set of access codes, codes that I'll provide, that allow them to flag the accounts as under review. Not freeze them, flag them. Flagged accounts can still be accessed, Dorian said slowly. For approximately 6 hours, yes. After 6 hours, flagged accounts trigger an automatic review cascade under the bank's internal protocols. Accounts get frozen. Every transaction that was routed through the network for the last 9 years becomes visible to internal auditors. She paused. But for 6 hours, they look completely normal. So when Corsetti receives the codes from you, he'll verify them. He'll run an access check on 2 or 3 of the accounts, see normal balances, normal transaction histories. He'll believe he has the full ledger. She breathed in. And then he'll present it to his alliance partners at the meeting tomorrow. And 6 hours after you give him the codes, every account in the network freezes and the full transaction history of every criminal operation your father touched in 9 years becomes visible to 48 internal compliance departments simultaneously. He said it slowly, working through it. That's not law enforcement action. That's institutional action. Law enforcement can be managed, she said. Bought, delayed, redirected. Internal bank compliance cannot. It's automated, it's distributed, and it operates under regulatory frameworks that override any external interference. She let that sit. My father built the network across 48 institutions because diversification protected it. What protects it also destroys it, if you pull the right threads at once. Corsetti's organization runs on that network. His entire financial infrastructure, every account, every reserve, every liquid asset he has positioned for the northern expansion. She paused. It disappears in 6 hours. Not seized, not confiscated. Simply inaccessible, under review, entangled in institutional process that will take months to adjudicate. She turned back toward the window she couldn't see. He goes to that meeting tomorrow with a ledger that works for 6 hours. He makes his promises. His partners commit. And then everything collapses simultaneously, in real time, in front of the 3 organizations he was using the meeting to impress. Another long silence. He doesn't just lose the money, Dorian said. He loses the alliance. He loses the credibility. He loses everything he built the last 2 years on. She heard something move in Dorian's hands. The map, she thought, set down on the desk. He built his whole play on the assumption that the ledger was leverage. I'm going to make it a trap. Your father, Dorian said quietly, would have... He stopped. I know, she said. She didn't need him to finish it. Yoon needs the codes now if she's going to reach all 48 compliance departments before market open. Then get her on the phone. It took 4 hours. She narrated all 7 sequences to Yoon over a secure line, each one twice, while Yoon's team worked through the decryption architecture with the base 12 matrix, and Dorian translated the structural elements he remembered from building the original system with her father. They got it wrong 3 times. The 3rd time, she felt the specific exhaustion of someone who has been running at a cognitive intensity that the body wasn't designed to sustain for this long. The headache that came with it, the slight tremor in her hands, the way her voice had started to flatten at the edges. She kept going. At 2 in the afternoon, Yoon confirmed contact with the first 11 institutions. By 4:33. By 6, all 48. The flags are in place, Yoon said through the phone. Dormant until activated. 6-hour cascade from the moment of activation. How do we activate? A single code word sent to each compliance contact via the institutional secure channel. I'll have a team member standing by at each institution's channel. One word from you triggers simultaneous activation across all 48. What's the word? A pause. Serena heard Dorian say from across the room, Luna. She hadn't expected that. She pressed her thumb against the edge of the desk and held it there for a moment and didn't say anything. Luna, she said. That's the activation word. Yes, Dorian said. Quietly. She released the edge of the desk. Yoon, confirm. Confirmed, Yoon said. Standing by. They left the penthouse at 10:45 p.m. Dorian had 4 men. Reyes, who had graduated from zip-tied bathroom floor to active operation with a composure that she noted approvingly, and 3 others whose names she learned in the elevator down to the parking structure. Castillo was in the hospital with a concussion. Mercer was secured in a room on the 38th floor with 2 men she didn't know sitting outside his door. She wore the same dark clothes from this morning, cane in her right hand, blade retracted. She had debated leaving the cane, bringing something less conspicuous, and had decided against it. The cane was her geometry. Without it, her model of unfamiliar spaces degraded to the point where she became genuinely limited, and tonight she could not afford genuine limitation. The drive to Lower Manhattan took 18 minutes. Nobody talked much. She sat in the back seat of the Escalade and listened to the city change around them. The density of sounds shifting as they moved from Midtown through the corridor of glass and finance, the traffic thinning, the echoes off the buildings changing character as the architecture went from vertical steel to the older, lower stone of the financial district. The car stopped 2 blocks from Broad Street. Generator first, she said. Castaneda and Webb are already on the roof, Reyes said. They went up an hour ago through the building next door. There's a shared roof access, old fire code connection. When we're at the south stairwell entrance, I need them to take the generator offline first. Then we cut the grid. Not simultaneous. Generator first, count to 5, then grid. Understood. And I need 30 seconds from the moment the alarm goes dark before anyone moves. 30 seconds of nothing. If Corsetti's people are monitoring the alarm panel and it goes dark, the first instinct is to wait and see if it comes back. If nothing happens for 30 seconds, they assume a glitch. If something happens in those 30 seconds, they know it isn't. 30 seconds, Dorian said. From her left, close. Yes. She heard him relay it to his team on the earpiece. They moved through the street in 2 groups. She and Dorian and Reyes in the first group, the other 2 men trailing by half a block. She let Reyes take the right flank position where his body would register to anyone watching as a couple and a friend walking on Broad Street at 11 p.m., which in the financial district meant invisible, meant nothing to look at, meant exactly the kind of pedestrian noise that security cameras categorized and dismissed. She tracked the block through her cane, found the building's south face. The limestone was cold and rough-textured under her free hand as they moved along the service alley, distinct from the smoother stonework of the main facade. The south stairwell entrance was a steel door set 6 inches into the wall. She found it by the airflow change, a thin, cold stream through the gap around the door frame. They stopped. She put her back against the wall beside the door and waited. Dorian on the other side of the door frame. Reyes 2 steps back. Through her earpiece, generator down, she counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the very faint hum she hadn't consciously registered until it stopped. The background electromagnetic presence of the building's power running through the walls simply ceased. The alarm panel behind the door went dark. She knew it had because she heard the specific sound of a hardwired system losing power. A brief tonal descent, almost musical, the frequency dropping as the current failed. She counted 30 seconds, 28, 29, 30. She reached for the door. Dorian put his hand over hers on the handle. 1 second, just pressure. She understood it. Not a restraint, a check. Are you ready? She was ready. She opened the door. The stairwell smelled like concrete and old metal and the particular cold that sub-basements generate when no one is living in them. She knew the pressure sensors were on the 3rd and 7th steps. Mercer had been specific, and she had encoded the information with the same precision she encoded everything. She went down on the left edge of the stairs, where the risers met the wall, distributing her weight against the vertical surface rather than the horizontal tread. The sensors were pressure plate triggers embedded in the center of each step. 3rd step. She sidestepped completely, 1 foot on the 2nd, 1 foot on the 4th, her hand against the wall for balance and orientation. 7th step, same. She heard Dorian behind her, and Reyes mirroring her route without instruction. They'd briefed this. They knew. The sub-basement corridor was warmer than the stairwell. She could smell it before she reached the bottom. Heated air, the faint trace of food, the low-frequency vibration of multiple people in an enclosed space. Men in a room that was trying to be comfortable and was fundamentally a bunker. The corridor was straight. 40 feet, she estimated from the acoustic return of her first cane tap, which she made once, very softly, and then did not make again because 40 feet of corridor with men behind a door at the end of it was not the place for auditory navigation tools. She switched to wall trailing. Right hand on the wall, cane angled low and close. At the end of the corridor, light. Not much. The thin line of it under a door. She could feel the warmth of it on the floor through the cold of the concrete, a slight shift in the thermal gradient that the building's HVAC was managing poorly. She heard voices. More than 2. The specific acoustic profile of a large room with multiple people. She counted breath patterns and chair weight shifts and the different positions of voices in the space and came up with 5, possibly 6. 5 or 6 men in the room with Corsetti. She put her hand on the door. Dorian's mouth was very close to her ear. You don't have to be the one to go in. Yes, I do, she said, very quiet. He needs to see me walk in. He needs to believe he's won. If it goes wrong, I know where everything is in the room before I enter it, she said. You don't. That's the difference between us in this particular situation. She heard his breath, heard him not argue. She opened the door. The room was large. She got the dimensions instantly from the acoustic bloom, the way sound expanded off the far wall, high ceiling, the irregular surface of original vault infrastructure somewhere to the right. She stepped inside and stopped and let the door swing behind her but not close, leaving a crack she could hear through. 6 men. She placed them in 2 seconds, 4 positioned around the perimeter, 1 at a table in the center, 1 standing near the back wall. The standing man was wrong, slightly wrong, in the way that a person holding weight at hip level was wrong, which meant a weapon, which meant someone positioned specifically to cover the entrance. The man at the table said, Miss Vale, Raphael Corsetti. She had built a voice profile of him from the 3 recordings Dorian had played her during the planning session. 60-something, she estimated from the vocal quality. A man accustomed to rooms being quiet when he spoke, accustomed to the weight of his own decisions landing without resistance. There was no surprise in his voice. He had been waiting for her. That was wrong. That was very wrong. She kept her face even. Mr. Corsetti. I wondered which way Mercer would play it, Corsetti said, conversationally, like they were discussing weather. He's been unreliable, let's say, emotionally complicated about the loyalties involved. The chair shifted. He was leaning back, she thought, relaxed weight. Did he give you the information you needed to find this place? She said nothing. It's all right, I used him for his access, not his judgment. His judgment has always been his weakness. A pause. Please, come in. I'm not interested in violence tonight. I'm interested in a transaction. She walked in further, 4 steps, stopped. Where's Dorian Viscari? Corsetti said. Not here. He let you come alone. He doesn't own my decisions. A sound from Corsetti that might have been appreciation. No, I don't suppose he does. The chair moved. He was standing. She tracked the weight transfer. Your father said something similar. First time I met him, I told him what I needed and he said, you don't own my decisions, you rent them. I found that remarkable. Most men in his position would have agreed to anything. A pause. Your father was remarkable. My father is dead, she said. You killed him. My men made a mistake, Corsetti said, and the particular way he said it, evenly, without apology but without denial, told her something specific about who he was. A man who distinguished between the decision and its outcome. Who could admit the outcome was wrong while believing the decision was correct? I wanted him brought to me, not killed. The men responsible for that mistake are no longer with my organization. That's not a comfort. It wasn't meant to be. He was moving, slowly, around the left side of the table, not toward her, circling. I'm told you have your father's ledger, the complete system. Not physically, but... He paused. In here. She heard him tap his own temple. That's extraordinary, Miss Vale. I've been looking for 9 years. It was inside you the entire time. Yes. And you're here to give it to me. Yes. The room was quiet in the specific way of people who don't trust a simple answer. Why? Corsetti said. Because I want this finished. She said it flat. My father is dead. My mother is dead. I have spent 10 years navigating a world that doesn't know I exist, attached to a story I didn't know I was part of. I want out of that story, and the only way out is through you. Through me. You want the ledger. I want my life back. Those two things can coexist. A long silence. She heard him considering it, heard the specific quality of a man's silence when he's deciding whether the thing in front of him is a gift or a trap. There are conditions, she said, before he could push further. Of course. My name disappears from your organization's intelligence permanently. No record of my existence in connection with my father's work. No future contact. Reasonable. And Dorian Vescari's organization is not touched. His people, his structures, his current enterprises. Whatever conflict exists between you, it doesn't escalate. A pause. That's a larger ask. The ledger is a larger offer. Another pause. Agreed. She heard the breath she took come out slower than it went in. She reached into the pocket of her sweater and withdrew a piece of paper. She had written nothing on it. It was blank. But she held it with the deliberateness of someone presenting a document, letting him see the gesture. The first sequence is the index, 48 institutions. I'll narrate it to whoever you designate to record it. Narrate it to me, Corsetti said. She turned her face in his direction. Sit down first, she said. It's long. He sat. She heard the chair accept his weight, heard the 4 perimeter men adjust their positions, the slight lean-in of people who are about to hear something they've been waiting for. She heard, from the crack in the door behind her, the near-silent, controlled breath of Dorian Vescari, and she began. She narrated the first sequence, precisely, accurately, with the spacing and rhythm her father had given it. She heard someone recording, a phone, probably, propped on the table. She heard Corsetti's breathing deepen slightly as the structure of it resolved into something recognizable, the architectural profile of a real financial system, the weight of real access. She narrated the second sequence. The third. At the fourth, she heard Corsetti stand, the excitement in his movement, contained, but there, in the speed of the weight transfer. A man watching something he's wanted for 9 years coming into reach. Stop, he said. I need to verify. Of course. She heard him moving. A laptop, somewhere on the table. She heard the keyboard, the specific rhythm of someone entering an account access string. She heard him wait, heard the brief chime of a successful login. Account balance confirmed, Tishab, he said to someone in the room. Transaction history looks complete. A pause. Continue. She narrated the fourth sequence, the fifth. During the sixth, she said the activation word, not loudly, not differently from any other word in the sequence. Her father had built the system with that in mind, the same attention he'd paid to everything, the same patient, terrifying care. The word Luna appeared in the sixth sequence as a component, a natural element of the pattern, and she said it the way she said every other character group, cleanly, without inflection, without emphasis. Across 48 institutions in 5 countries, Yoon's team received the confirmation in the secure channels and activated the cascade simultaneously. Serena continued narrating. She finished the 6th. She began the 7th. Halfway through the 7th sequence, Corsetti's phone rang. He answered it. She heard his voice change in real time. Not dramatically, not immediately, but the particular quality of warmth and controlled excitement going cold in his voice, the way temperature drops from a room when a window breaks. What do you mean the accounts are... He stopped. All of them. Not a question. When? A pause. A longer one. When? She finished the 7th sequence. She folded the blank paper and put it back in her pocket. About 6 hours ago, she said. The room was completely still. She heard Corsetti put the phone down on the table, heard it make a precise flat sound against the surface, heard him breathe. 3 times, carefully, the way a man breathes when the option of violence is right there, and he is choosing, in real time, whether to take it. The accounts are flagged, she said. Not frozen yet, but in... She paused as if consulting an internal clock, which she was. Approximately 5 hours and 50 minutes, every account in the network goes into institutional review simultaneously across 48 banks. The full transaction history of everything my father built becomes visible to internal compliance teams in 5 countries. Compliance teams report to regulatory bodies. Regulatory bodies do not negotiate. She turned her face toward him. You have the codes. They're real. You verified them yourself, and they are now completely useless to you. Corsetti said nothing for a long time. Then, you came here to destroy it. I came here to end it, she said. Those aren't the same thing. The meeting tomorrow will not go the way you planned. She kept her voice level, academic almost, the way she'd always spoken about music theory to students who needed the architecture explained before the emotion would make sense. Your alliance partners are expecting a functional financial network. What you'll be presenting them is an audit trail. She heard the sound she had been anticipating, the shift of the man near the back wall, the one with the weapon at hip level, the one positioned to cover the entrance. He moved, and from the crack in the door behind her, Dorian Viscari came through it. She dropped, not away from the center of the room, toward the table, toward the known geometry, toward the acoustic anchor of Corsetti's position, inside the engagement range of the man coming from the back wall, which meant inside the space where a weapon couldn't be raised and fired without risk of hitting the primary target. She hit the table edge with her shoulder, absorbed it, found the near leg of Corsetti's chair with her cane tip. The room erupted, not into chaos, into the specific organized violence of trained men responding to a threat, which was different from chaos because it had shape and direction. And shape and direction were things she could track. She tracked it through sound, the sharp report of Dorian's weapon, suppressed but not silent, from behind her and to the right. Reyes coming through the door half a second after Dorian, breaking left, which she knew because he told her in the car, and she'd filed it. The 2 men from the exterior entering through the corridor, which she heard as the secondary door on the far side opening. 4 men on Dorian's side, 6 on Corsetti's. She was not on either side. She was on the floor beside the table with her cane deployed and her mind running the room at full resolution. Corsetti had not moved. She heard him very close. He'd stood, was standing over her. Was the one person in the room who wasn't moving because he was processing, calculating, understanding that the woman on the floor beside him was not a victim of the room's violence, but had caused it. She said from the floor without getting up, "Sit down, Mr. Corsetti." "You, up..." His voice came out different, stripped of the controlled warmth, something underneath it that was older and raw and more honest than anything he'd said since she walked in. "You handed me the codes knowing they were already..." "Yes. You walked in here knowing..." "Yes. Your father trained you for this," he said. And there was something in his voice that she did not expect. Not anger, though anger was there. Something that sat beneath the anger. Something that sounded like recognition. "He trained you to do exactly this. He trained me to survive whatever came after him," she said. "I decided the rest myself." The room was resolving. She could hear it. The reduction of active movement, the specific sound of men being secured rather than engaged, the decrease in overlapping threat vectors. Dorian's people were good, fast. The 6 became manageable in the space of 90 seconds that felt like something much longer. Corsetti sat down. She wasn't sure if he chose to or if his legs made the decision without consulting him. Either way, the chair accepted his weight, and the room's remaining violence settled into aftermath. The particular quiet of a space where a fight has just ended, saturated with adrenaline and carbon and the sharp smell of discharged weapons. Raphael Corsetti, Dorian's voice from somewhere behind her and to her right. Professional. Without heat. My people have your organization's primary communications server. We have the operations logs from the last 14 months. Everything Grant Mercer passed to you and everything your people planned in response is documented. A pause. This is finished. Corsetti said nothing. Corsetti. The man responsible for my father's murder, Serena said from the floor, still not standing, her voice very even, is sitting in a chair 2 feet from me, and every financial structure that gave him power over this city will be inaccessible within 6 hours. She stood up, cane in her right hand. She turned her face toward where Corsetti was sitting. I'm not going to have you killed, she said, and meant it. My father didn't want blood. He wanted out. He wanted to build something clean from what he'd built and walk away. She breathed, so I'm going to do what he couldn't. I'm going to walk away. And you're going to let me, because the alternative is that I spend the next 6 hours on the phone with every regulatory body in 5 countries telling them exactly where to look in the compliance reports that are going to land on their desks tomorrow morning. And if I let you walk away, Corsetti said, I get nothing. You get to keep the money that isn't in the network, she said. Whatever personal reserves you hold outside my father's architecture. Whatever you built before you came looking for the ledger. She paused. It's not nothing. It's what you had before you decided my father's work was something you could take. The room breathed. She heard Dorian cross toward her, felt him stop at arm's length. We need to move, he said quietly. I know. Corsetti? He'll make the right calculation, she said, and turned away from Raphael Corsetti without another word. The way you turn away from a problem that has been solved, that no longer requires your attention, that will persist in its consequences without needing you to watch it happen. She found the door with her cane. The corridor was cold and straight, and she knew the 3rd step and the 7th step, and she went up them without hesitation, and she came out of the south stairwell into the November air of lower Manhattan at 11:47 p.m. with the storm long gone, and the sky above the financial district doing that particular starless thing it did when the clouds. The sky above lower Manhattan was doing that particular starless thing it did when the clouds cleared after a storm, but the light pollution took over completely, turning the atmosphere a flat amber gray that was neither dark nor light, but something in between. The color of a city that never fully committed to night. Serena felt it on her face as she came out of the south stairwell. The cold air, the absence of rain, the specific quality of after, the way a space feels when the thing that was going to happen has happened and the world has not yet reorganized itself around the new fact. She stood on the service alley pavement for a moment and just breathed. Dorian came out behind her, then Reyes, then the other 2. She heard them reassembling in the alley, heard the quiet confirmation of status in clipped words, clean, clear, moving, and heard the professional efficiency of men doing the final steps of something they'd planned, the way musicians do in the last bars of a difficult passage, muscle memory carrying the execution while the mind begins to release. Reyes, Dorian said, take the team back to the vehicles. We'll follow in 5. Sir. Footsteps moving away. Then it was just the 2 of them in the alley, and the city, and the amber-gray sky. She heard Dorian exhale, a long, controlled breath that had been waiting since the moment he'd come through that door 40 minutes ago. Corsetti, she said. He'll make the calculation. His voice was tired, not defeated. The specific tiredness of someone who has spent something finite and is now tallying the cost. He's a businessman first, always has been. The network is gone. The alliance is gone. What's left isn't worth the war it would take to respond. You believe that? I've known Raphael Corsetti for 19 years, Dorian said. I believe he'll hate what happened tonight for a very long time. I don't believe he'll move against us. Us. She noted the word, didn't address it. Mercer, she said. Yoon has him. She'll handle the debrief and the disposition. That's mine to deal with. What does that mean? It means I'll deal with it, he said. Not cruelly, not obscurely, just with the weight of a man acknowledging that some things in his world did not resolve cleanly or publicly, and that he wasn't going to pretend otherwise by softening the language. She appreciated that, she found. the absence of euphemism. Her father had been the same way about certain things. She started walking toward the end of the alley. The compliance cascade completes in... She checked the time in her head, the internal clock she'd been running since the activation word. 5 hours and 42 minutes. After that, the regulatory referrals go automatically. I know. Some of those accounts were yours, she said. Some of my father's architecture was built for your organization. A pause. Yes. You knew that when you authorized the cascade. Another pause. Longer. Yes. She stopped walking, turned toward him. How much? A significant portion of the organization's liquid reserves were routed through your father's network in the early years, he said, before I began restructuring. The legitimate enterprises are clean, separately structured, no connection to the network. But the transitional assets, he stopped. A significant portion. That's going to hurt you. Yes. You authorized it anyway. You asked me to. I asked you to authorize the cascade, she said. I didn't know your own money was in it. I knew, he said simply. She stood in the cold alley and held that. The specific weight of it. A man who had spent 11 years building a criminal empire and the last several years trying to walk away from it. Who had watched a dead man's daughter reconstruct herself in the dark. Who had stood in a hotel lobby 2 nights ago and said a single word that had redirected the course of both their lives. Who had just authorized the destruction of a significant part of his own financial architecture because she had asked him to. Why? She said. She heard him take a step toward her. He stopped within the distance that he'd kept consistently since the hotel. Not crowding, not retreating, chosen. Your father told me once that the measure of a decision wasn't what it cost you, Dorian said. It was what you would have made differently if you could go back. He paused. I've been going back for 9 years. To the night they went after him. To the choices I made in the 18 months before that. When I knew the tension with Corsetti was escalating and I didn't move fast enough to protect the people in the architecture. His voice was very even. I can't change that, but I could choose what to do with tonight. She was quiet for a moment. You're not asking me to forgive you for not protecting him, she said. No, I'm not asking you for anything. Good, she said. Because I'm not there yet. I may not get there. I know, but I'm not... She stopped, started again. I don't think you're a bad man. I think you're a man who built something that required bad decisions and made most of them without flinching and is now trying to figure out what's left after you stop flinching. She turned back toward the end of the alley. That's a different thing. She heard him follow. They walked out of the alley onto Broad Street and the city received them without comment. The way cities receive everything. As one more set of footsteps in the dark, one more arrangement of people moving from one place to another without the street knowing or caring what they were carrying. Us. The Whitmore Chamber Orchestra's administrative office was on West 57th Street, 4 blocks from Carnegie Hall, in a building that smelled like old carpet and the particular institutional air of organizations that had been running in the same space for 30 years. Patricia Huang had been there when Serena called from the car at 12:40 a.m., had been there because Patricia Huang was 63 years old and had never once in 40 years of arts administration been anywhere other than exactly where she needed to be. You missed the concert, Patricia said. On the phone, not accusatory, just stating the fact the way a person states a fact when the fact is large enough that it doesn't need emphasis. I know. Kessler covered your part. He was adequate. A pause. He was not you. I'll call the music director in the morning. I already called him. I told him you had a family emergency. That's, she paused. That's actually accurate. I assumed. You've never missed a performance in 7 years. Another pause, the specific kind Patricia used when she was deciding something. Are you all right? She was in the back seat of the Escalade heading uptown, and Dorian was in the front passenger seat, and Reyes was driving, and the city was outside doing what cities do at 1 a.m. when the night crowd has thinned to the people who have specific reasons to be awake. I think so, she said. I'll know more in the morning. The morning, Patricia said, is in 5 hours. Then I'll know in 5 hours. She heard Patricia breathe in through her nose. The specific sound of a woman choosing not to ask the questions she had. The September residency. We'll need you for the full run. I'll be there. Good. A pause. Serena, whatever happened, you sound different. I am different, she said. She ended the call. The city slid past outside the glass. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. The specific rhythmic pressure of Manhattan at night. The way the density of the place registered even through the insulated walls of an armored vehicle. The sum of 8 million lives running on different clocks in the same contained geography. All of it present and indifferent and vast. She had lived in this city for 9 years, had navigated it with a white cane and a precise acoustic model, and a conservatory-trained ear, and the systematic patience of someone who had learned to build the world from the inside out, rather than taking it for granted from the outside in. She had not known, for 9 years, what the city was carrying underneath itself, what her father had buried in it, what was running in the dark beneath the surface of the life she'd built. Now she knew. She sat with that knowledge and found that it was heavy and clarifying, and that it did not fundamentally change who she was. Changed what she knew about how she'd gotten here. Didn't change the destination. That surprised her slightly. She had expected revelation to feel more like destruction. It felt more like surgery, the particular aftermath of something that had cut deep and cleaned out what was infected, and now the tissue was raw, and the healing would take time. But the thing that had been wrong was gone. Her father was still dead. That was still true. Would always be true. But he had not been what she'd been told. He had been more and less and more complicated and more frightened and more careful and more loving than the simple narrative of accident and loss had allowed her to understand. He had been a man who made choices in a world with bad options and tried to protect the people he loved inside the consequences of those choices, and had not fully succeeded and had known he wasn't fully succeeding and had kept trying anyway. She knew that person. She had met that person in herself tonight in a sub-basement on Broad Street. Luna, he had called her, because the moonlight was coming through the hospital window when he first held her, and he was a man who noticed those things, who paid attention to the quality of light and built systems that lasted 9 years and hid his life's most important work inside his daughter's memory because he trusted her more than he trusted anything else he'd built. She put her hand over her mouth for a moment, not to hide it, just to hold the feeling still long enough to feel it clearly. Then she put her hand down. "Vescari," she said. "Yes." "The penthouse. How long can I stay?" A pause. "As long as you need." "I need 2 weeks," she said. "Maybe 3. My apartment is—" She stopped. The men Corsetti had sent were still there, technically, or had been when all of this started. Yoon's people had moved on the apartment in the early hours of the morning. Dorian had mentioned it briefly during the planning session, and she'd filed it as logistics. "I assume your people have cleared my apartment." 2 hours ago. Clean." "Good," she breathed. "I'll go back in 2 weeks. I need—" She searched for the right word. "I need to not be alone right now, for a short time. I need to be in a place with people and structure while I—" She stopped again. "I'm not asking for anything from you. I'm telling you what I need." "I understand the difference," Dorian said, from the front seat, quietly. "Good." 3 weeks later, on the first Tuesday of September, the Financial News carried a story about a simultaneous compliance review across 48 international banking institutions that had resulted in the flagging of a complex cross-jurisdictional account network. Regulatory bodies in 5 countries had received referrals. Several organizations were under investigation. The story used the language that financial journalism used for these things. Alleged criminal enterprise, under review, sources close to the investigation, and it ran for 2 days and then was replaced by other stories because the news cycle had the attention span of a city, which was to say none at all. Serena read none of it. Patricia read all of it and said nothing to her about it, which was one of the reasons Serena had worked with Patricia Huang for 7 years. She went back to her apartment on West 83rd on a Wednesday. The apartment had been cleaned, not by her building service, by Yoon's people, who were apparently thorough in ways that went beyond dusting. Everything was where it had been. The cello stand was by the window. The Braille reader was on the kitchen counter. The voicemails from her father were still on her phone in the specific folder she'd made for them 6 years ago, labeled simply with his initials, which she opened sometimes and sometimes did not. She stood in the apartment for a long time without moving. Then she unpacked the cello from its case, loosened the bow, sat in the chair by the window, and played. Not the Dvořák. Not anything programmatic or structured or assigned. She played the thing she played when no one was listening and nothing was required of her. The thing that had no name because she had never written it down. That existed only as long as she was playing it and then ceased to exist until the next time she needed it. It had been her father's gift to her without him knowing. The idea that music could be a private language. Something that belonged entirely to the person speaking it and communicated nothing to anyone else. That existed purely in the act of making it. She played for an hour. When she stopped, the apartment was quiet and the September afternoon was outside the window doing something with light that she couldn't see but could feel. The particular warmth of early fall sun coming through glass, landing on her hands, on the body of the instrument. Her phone was on the arm of the chair. She picked it up, opened the folder with her father's initials, played the oldest message, his voice. 63 seconds. He was telling her to eat something before the afternoon rehearsal. She'd called him that morning complaining about not having time for lunch, and he was listing the contents of her refrigerator from memory because he'd been to her apartment the week before and had taken note, the way he took note of everything, methodically and without announcing that he was doing it. "There's leftover rice from Tuesday," he said on the recording, "and those little yogurt things you like. Don't tell me there's no time. You have 11 minutes between the subway and the rehearsal room. I've walked that route." She had, of course, eaten the leftover rice. She sat with his voice in the September afternoon and let it be what it was. Not evidence, not a code, not a key to anything, just her father's voice telling her to eat something. The grief was not smaller than it had been before this week. If anything, it was cleaner, more precisely located, more real. She had learned things about him that complicated the narrative she'd built over 10 years. And the complication was painful in the specific way that true things are painful, because they demanded a more honest accounting, and honest accountings cost something. He had made choices that endangered her, had built a life that put her in the path of men like Corsetti, had hidden things from her. The nature of his work, the nature of the danger, the nature of what he'd hidden inside her memory, out of a combination of love and arrogance and fear that she recognized because she had felt all three of those things herself in the last 2 weeks. She did not absolve him. She did not condemn him. She held what was true about him, complicated and insufficient and loving and frightened and brilliant, and let it be true without resolving it into something simpler. That was the work. That was what the grief required. Not resolution, accuracy. She put the phone down. Quiet. Dorian Viscari came to Carnegie Hall on the opening night of the September residency. She didn't know he was there until after. She knew the hall the way she knew every hall she'd performed in for more than 2 seasons. The acoustic signature of it, the precise dimensions of the stage, the way the sound returned to her from the back wall during the quiet passages, the specific creak of the third chair in the second violin section that the luthier had been asked to fix and apparently had not. She knew the weight of the air when 2,300 seats were full, the particular quality of collective attention that an audience generates when it has gone quiet to listen, which was a different quality from the quiet of an empty room. Denser, warmer, threaded through with the invisible fact of 2,300 people holding their breath in the same direction. She played the Dvořák, the 42nd time. It was different from the 41st, the way it was always different from the time before. Not in the notes, never in the notes, but in the thing underneath the notes that she had never found adequate language for and had stopped trying to. The thing that changed as she changed, that carried whatever had happened between one performance and the next, that was the reason the same concerto played by the same musician in the same hall could sound like a different argument on a different night. Tonight it sounded like the inside of the last 2 weeks. She gave it everything those 2 weeks had cost her, and let it come through the instrument and out into the hall, and she did not soften it or shape it toward anything the audience would find comfortable, because the music was not comfortable, and making it comfortable would have been a lie, and she had spent 2 weeks learning the precise cost of lies of omission. In the fourth movement's final stretch, her bow arm was on fire and her left hand was cramping slightly from the sustained position, and she could feel the sweat at her hairline and the specific trembling exhaustion of a body that had been running above its baseline for weeks. And she played through all of it, played past it, The way she'd been taught to play past everything that the body raised as an objection, because the music was more important than the body's complaints, and always would be. The final note. She held it until the bow had nothing left to give. Then she lifted it. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then the hall came apart. She sat in it. The sound of 2,300 people releasing something, expressing something, that particular standing ovation sound that she had learned to locate herself inside rather than being overwhelmed by, to stand in the center of without losing the thread back to herself. She stood. She bowed. She found the principal violin's hand by feel and squeezed it, felt the squeeze returned. She did not cry. She had cried twice in the last 2 weeks. Once in the penthouse bathroom the morning after the meridian, sitting on the floor with her back against the door the same way she'd sat the first night, with no blade this time and no threat, just the accumulated weight of everything landing on her at once. Once 3 days later, alone in the apartment, playing the recording of her father's voice on loop until the grief was fully present rather than partially suppressed, and could therefore be processed rather than managed. She was done crying for now, probably not permanently, but for now. She went backstage. Patricia was there immediately with a water bottle and the specific efficiency of a woman who had shepherded musicians through the physical aftermath of performance for 4 decades. Serena drank the water, found the cello stand, settled the instrument into it with the automatic care of a person who has spent years learning that the instrument is more durable than it appears, but treating it as fragile anyway out of a love that wasn't entirely rational. The backstage area was filling with the post-concert noise, musicians coming off the stage, the string section filing past, someone opening the champagne that always appeared from somewhere in the wings on opening nights. She navigated it through the familiar topography of this specific backstage, the alcove she always used after concerts, the particular corner that was slightly quieter than the rest. She heard him before he spoke. The specific quality of stillness that organized itself around Dorian Vescari. She had learned it in the hotel lobby and had been refining her identification of it for 3 weeks. He was standing near the corridor entrance, 10 feet from her alcove, not approaching, waiting for her to acknowledge him or not. She turned toward him. "You came," she said. "Yes." "You should have told me you were coming. I wasn't sure you'd want me to." She considered that. "I might not have," she said, "but I would rather have known." He crossed to her, stopped at the distance he kept, the chosen distance, the one that was not crowding and not retreating. "How was it?" she said. Not the concert. She meant the last 3 weeks. "Expensive," he said, and meant the money and the other things. "The restructuring is accelerating. The legitimate enterprises are fully operational. The transition is," he paused, "uncomfortable for some of the people involved." "Are you managing it?" "Trying to." "That's all anyone does," she said. He was quiet for a moment. Around them, the backstage filled and partially cleared and refilled, musicians and administrators, and a few of the patrons who had backstage passes, the specific social ecosystem of a post-concert green room doing what it always did. "I have something for you," Dorian said. She waited. "There's a research team in Zurich," he said. "Neuroscience Institute, funded through a series of foundations. Clean, nothing connected to anything that mattered before. They've been working on a regenerative optic nerve protocol. 2nd generation, substantially different from the Berlin methodology." He paused. "They have a 6-month residency program beginning in November. I have a contact there, a Dr. Elise Wren. She runs the clinical trials division. She reviewed your case file last week. She thinks you're a viable candidate." Serena said nothing for a long moment. "You're not asking me," she said. "No, I'm telling you it exists. What you do with it is your decision. Like Berlin." "Like Berlin," he said. "Except this time you know who's funding it and why, and you can tell me to go to hell if you want." She almost smiled. Didn't quite. "I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking." She turned toward the corridor, the direction of the stage, the direction of the hall, where 2,300 people had just heard her play, and were now putting on their coats and finding their companions and heading out into the September night to live whatever was next for them. "The concert tonight," she said. "There's a piece I want to write. I've been working on it in my head for the last 3 weeks. I don't know what to call it yet." "What does it sound like?" She thought about it. Like everything that happened, she said, but from the other side. He was quiet. I want to perform it in this hall, she said. Not this season, next season maybe, when it's ready. She paused. I want it to be the first piece of music that exists specifically because of all of this, because of what my father hid and what happened when it came to light and what it cost and what it... She stopped, found the word. What it made possible. I'd like to hear it, Dorian said. Then be here when I play it. She said it simply, without weight, without more meaning than the words carried. An invitation that was exactly what it was, that not a promise, not a declaration, not the resolution of something that hadn't had time yet to become anything other than what it was. Two people standing in a backstage corridor, 3 weeks after the worst and most clarifying week of both their lives, deciding, without drama, to keep being present to whatever came next. She started toward the green room. Serena, his voice. She stopped. Your father, he said, and then stopped, seemed to reassemble whatever he'd started to say into something more accurate. He would have... Another stop. He knew what he was building into you. I don't think he knew exactly what you'd do with it, but he knew the shape of it, what it was going to be. A pause. He was proud of you before any of this happened. I want you to know that. It wasn't conditional on what you could do or what you could carry. It was just... His voice was doing something she hadn't heard from it before. Something underneath the professional control. Something older. He talked about you the way people talk about things they've made that are better than they expected. Like they can't believe they made something that good. She stood very still in the backstage corridor with the noise of the post-concert world flowing around her and her hand on her cane and her bow arm still slightly trembling from the final movement and the September night outside the building doing whatever September nights do when you can't see them. She breathed in, breathed out. Thank you, she said, and meant it in the full weight of what it cost him to say that and what it cost her to receive it, and what it would cost both of them to carry forward from here. She went into the green room. Outside Carnegie Hall, the city was being exactly what it always was, enormous and indifferent and full of people moving through it with their own versions of everything, their own grief and their own recklessness, and their own debts being paid or deferred, the whole grinding, beautiful machinery of 8 million lives running simultaneously on the same island. Somewhere in Lower Manhattan, 48 compliance teams were working through the cascade that had been triggered 6 weeks ago. The slow institutional machinery of financial regulation doing what financial regulation does when it has been given the right information at the right time. Grinding forward, implacably, without hurry, toward a conclusion that was no longer in question. Somewhere in the city, Raphael Corsetti was doing the calculation he'd been making for 6 weeks. The arithmetic of loss and adaptation. The particular mathematics that a man does when the structures he built his life on have been removed and what's left is the question of what he is without them. Somewhere in a building on West 57th Street, Patricia Huang was filing the concert report and making notes about the next program, and doing the 40 years of accumulated work that kept the music alive in this city the way it had always been kept alive. By people who showed up and did what was necessary without requiring it to be recognized as heroic. And in a backstage alcove at Carnegie Hall, Serena Vale sat down in the chair they kept there for her and set her cane across her knees and let the noise of the green room wash over her without requiring herself to participate in it yet, and began, very quietly, to hear the shape of the piece she was going to write. It started low, the cello's deepest register, the notes that were more vibration than sound, that you felt in the chest before you heard them with the ears. It started there, and it was slow, and it was not resolved, and it was not comfortable, and it did not arrive anywhere easy. And that was right. That was correct. That was the only honest way to begin something that was going to take a long time to finish. Her father had built his most important work inside her memory without telling her it was there. She was going to build hers where everyone could hear it. She closed her eyes. A habit. An old reflex, the remnant of the way sighted people shut the world out to think, that she had kept not because it served a practical function, but because it was hers. Because some things you keep simply because they were yours before everything changed. She closed her eyes, and in the dark behind them, which had been her permanent weather for 10 years, and which she had learned to navigate with the same systematic patience she brought to everything, the music began to take shape. Not borrowed, not hidden, not memorized from someone else's design, her own, built from the wreckage of what she'd been handed, and the precision of what she'd learned, and the grief that was accurate now, and the anger that had found its address, and the particular kind of trust that is not the same as forgiveness, and is not the same as safety, but is something realer than both. The kind that says, I see what you are, and I am choosing anyway, and underneath all of it, running through the architecture of it, the way a bass line runs through everything else without announcing itself. Her father's voice on an old voicemail counting the contents of her refrigerator because he had walked to her apartment and memorized them because he loved her and was afraid and could not say so directly, and so said it the only way he knew how. There's leftover rice from Tuesday. Don't tell me there's no time. She opened her eyes. The green room noise continued around her. Somewhere in the corridor, she heard Dorian Viscari's footsteps moving toward the exit. Not hurrying, just walking, the specific unhurried movement of a man who had somewhere to be but was not running from where he was. She did not call after him. She would see him again. She knew that the way she knew the third step and the seventh step and the acoustic dimensions of a room she'd only entered once, through attention, through the information already available if you were willing to process it clearly. She would see him again, and what they were to each other would be built slowly, the way anything real is built, from the material of what had actually happened rather than what either of them needed it to be. That was enough. The city outside was doing everything it always did, enormous and different, full of it, and in the middle of it, in a backstage alcove at Carnegie Hall with her hand on a cane her father had designed for her before he died, Serena Vale sat in the particular darkness that was her permanent home and composed the first bars of something that had never existed before. She played it for no one. It was perfect. This is an entirely fictional cinematic story created for entertainment purposes only. All characters, locations, events, and organizations depicted are wholly imaginary.